The first light of the evening crept softly across the uneven terrain, brushing the tops of the trees with a faint glow, as if the forest itself were preparing for something sacred. Shadows lengthened across the ground, curling around stones, roots, and patches of grass in an intricate dance, presaging the night to come. From afar, the faint flicker of firelight shivered through the undergrowth, a trembling heartbeat that marked the presence of a small, fragile community. It was a moment suspended in time, where the world seemed to hold its breath, and every rustle, every distant bird call, carried a weight of anticipation. The air smelled faintly of smoke, damp earth, and the subtle sweetness of drying herbs, a scent that had been part of this land for generations. For this tribe, fire was not merely warmth or light, it was memory, connection, and an anchor against the vast unknown that stretched beyond the trees. Families gathered around the central hearth, their movements deliberate, careful, almost ritualistic in their simplicity. Children clutched the edges of woven mats, their eyes wide and bright, reflecting the flickering flames, absorbing the sacred rhythm of the moment before words or explanations could reach them. Elders leaned close to the fire, faces lined by countless seasons, their eyes carrying the quiet gravity of experience. Each ember that rose and fell in the hearth mirrored the pulse of life itself, small, bright, and fleeting. Even in this intimate, domestic scene, there was an unmistakable hum of tension, a sense that this evening was unlike others, that something delicate and irreplaceable was about to be witnessed, experienced, and, inevitably, lost. The firelight moved across the group in soft waves, illuminating gestures that were almost imperceptible, a hand brushing another, a subtle nod, a fleeting smile that carried centuries of tradition within its simplicity. Smoke spiraled upward, twisting into the canopy of stars above, merging the earth with the sky, the living with the eternal. The tribe's presence was small against the backdrop of the night, yet it felt immense, as though the fire itself had been entrusted with preserving the essence of who they were. This glow was not only warmth but also memory made tangible, a living thread that connected the past to the present. Within its circle, generations of knowledge, songs, and stories existed in delicate equilibrium, ready to be shared once more before the inevitable shift. Every sound carried meaning, the crackle of wood, the low murmur of voices, the careful scraping of tools as preparations began. These noises, ordinary in isolation, together formed a symphony of survival, of life measured in small gestures and minute attention. The rhythm of the evening moved with precision, though to the untrained eye it might appear chaotic. Every movement was intentional, every glance significant. The children, sensing the gravity of the occasion even without understanding it fully, whispered among themselves, imitating the adults with an instinctive curiosity. Their laughter was cautious, like the tremor of a branch in a soft wind, playful yet restrained by the awareness that this night carried weight beyond the ordinary. In this opening scene, the viewer is invited to feel the heartbeat of the tribe, to experience the intimate closeness of their world while understanding its precariousness. Fire becomes a mirror, reflecting both the faces of the tribe and the fragility of their existence. Each flicker of flame is a reminder of the impermanence of life and the enduring human need to seek connection, to celebrate existence in the face of time's relentless passage. As the smoke rises, it carries stories that cannot be fully heard, tales that have been murmured for countless generations, spoken and unspoken, carried in gestures, glances, and silent understanding. The night holds its breath, and so does the audience, suspended in a delicate balance between awe and melancholy. Here, at the very threshold of the story, there is a quiet invitation to reflect on the universality of human experience. Even without knowing the names of those present, the audience recognizes the patterns: community, warmth, ritual, and memory. These early moments establish a tone that is both intimate and cinematic, drawing attention to the subtle interplay between survival and celebration, between ordinary life and profound significance. The fire is a heartbeat, the night is a witness, and the tribe exists in a suspended harmony, poised to enter the first dance of the evening, a dance that will mark not only the passage of the night but the final chapter of their shared rituals. It is an opening shot that lingers, inviting both reflection and emotional immersion, setting the stage for a story of impermanence, beauty, and the quiet dignity of human connection. The land stretched wide and untamed, a mosaic of forests, rivers, and rolling hills that seemed to have existed long before the tribe and would continue long after. Every ridge, every curve of the riverbank, every grove of trees held stories older than any memory the tribe could recount. Moss hung like green lace from the branches of ancient oaks, swaying gently in the evening breeze, whispering secrets in a language older than human speech. The soil, dark and rich, smelled of life and decay in equal measure, a constant reminder of the cycles of existence. Water ran clear in streams that shimmered with the reflections of the slowly fading sky, tumbling over stones worn smooth by centuries of passage. This was a land that demanded respect, a land that gave generously but required intimate knowledge and patience to navigate. The tribe moved through it not as conquerors, but as humble inhabitants, learning its rhythms, understanding its moods, and discovering its hidden treasures through careful observation and centuries of accumulated wisdom. The forests were alive in ways the eye alone could not capture. Birds called across the canopy, each species with its own rhythm and tone, signaling everything from the presence of predators to the ripening of fruit. Small mammals rustled in the underbrush, their movements precise, cautious, and almost invisible, as if the earth itself moved with a quiet intelligence. Insects hummed and buzzed, some so tiny they could almost be overlooked, yet their presence was woven into the broader symphony of life. Flowers, some bright with color, others subtle in hue, punctuated the green of the undergrowth, offering nourishment to pollinators and beauty to those who paused to notice. Even the wind carried meaning, whispering through leaves, bending tall grass in silent patterns, reminding all who observed that this was a world of constant motion and quiet communication. For the tribe, every element of this land had purpose. Stones were used for sharpening tools, for constructing shelters, or for marking sacred spaces. Streams provided fresh water, fish, and irrigation for small cultivated patches, while the surrounding trees offered fruit, nuts, and wood for fire. The topography guided movement, with hills serving as vantage points to survey the territory and valleys providing shelter from harsh winds and storms. The tribe understood the subtle language of seasons, recognizing when berries would ripen, when animals would migrate, and when the rains would come to rejuvenate the soil. They were attentive listeners, observing the whispers of the land as closely as they attended to each other, knowing that survival depended not just on strength or skill, but on understanding the delicate balance of the natural world. The skies themselves seemed to participate in this harmony. Morning mists clung to the hollows and valleys, softening the contours of the landscape and creating a world that appeared almost dreamlike, ethereal in its fleeting beauty. Sunlight filtered through branches, creating moving patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor, a living mosaic that shifted with the passing hours. Nights were dominated by stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch, the Milky Way spilling across the heavens in luminous rivers. The tribe looked upward often, reading celestial cues to guide planting, hunting, and seasonal rituals. The constellations were not merely distant lights, they were companions, teachers, and markers of time, intertwined with stories that had been passed down for generations. Each star, each planet, each phase of the moon carried significance, weaving together the practical and the mystical in ways that grounded the tribe firmly within both the tangible and the spiritual dimensions of their world. Yet the land was not only beautiful, it was demanding. Sudden storms could turn rivers into torrents, flattening trees and eroding soil in a single night. Predators, from wolves to bears, prowled the edges of human habitation, testing vigilance and courage. Poisonous plants and insects lurked in shaded corners, reminding the tribe that knowledge, respect, and caution were essential for survival. The tribe's elders had spent lifetimes observing these dangers, passing on wisdom about which berries were safe, which tracks indicated an approaching threat, and how to navigate sudden floods or shifting winds. This knowledge was not written but lived, encoded in the careful rituals, the songs, and the habits of daily life, a continuous education in listening, watching, and responding to the land's infinite subtleties. Paths worn by generations of feet crisscrossed the territory, linking hunting grounds, water sources, and sacred sites. Each path carried history, etched by countless footsteps, telling silent stories of births, deaths, and celebrations long before the tribe's current members were born. Alongside these routes, stones marked boundaries or points of significance, offering guidance to travelers or reminding them of lessons learned and moments shared. These paths were both physical and symbolic, representing movement through space as well as time. They were arteries of memory, binding together the tribe and the land in a network that intertwined the past with the present, ensuring that knowledge and experience were never lost, only transformed and carried forward. In this landscape, survival and beauty were inseparable. The tribe's existence depended on attentiveness and humility, yet within those constraints, there was room for wonder. Children explored under watchful eyes, learning the shapes of leaves, the call of birds, and the way sunlight shifted through branches. Hunters listened to subtle signs of prey, learning patience and precision. Elders walked slowly, feeling the contours of familiar soil beneath their feet, recalling seasons long past. Each member of the tribe was attuned to the land not as a backdrop but as a living, breathing participant in their lives. They knew that every action, from gathering berries to building a fire, sent ripples through this intricate system of life, and that respect for the land was not only practical but moral and spiritual. By the time night fully descended, the tribe had already internalized the patterns of the land, moving with its rhythm and acknowledging its authority. The fire that would mark their final dance was prepared within this vast and intricate setting, a small human heartbeat amidst the sprawling, untamed wilderness. Here, surrounded by rivers, forests, and hills that had witnessed countless generations, the tribe's connection to the land became almost sacred, a reminder that life is both fleeting and eternal, fragile yet resilient, and that even the smallest human gestures exist in dialogue with the vastness of the natural world. Every sound, every scent, every shadow of this land would become part of the memory of this night, woven into the enduring tapestry of a place that had nurtured, challenged, and inspired them for as long as anyone could remember. The firelight cast long, trembling shadows across the clearing, revealing faces that seemed to emerge from the darkness as if conjured by the flames themselves. Each expression, every fleeting glance, spoke volumes about the lives, emotions, and histories held within this small community. Children crouched near the edges of the circle, eyes wide with curiosity and awe, their faces illuminated in warm hues that made every freckle and line of innocence visible. They watched the adults with a mixture of imitation and admiration, mimicking gestures, copying movements, and silently absorbing lessons that would guide them through the years ahead. In their small hands, tools or sticks became instruments of play and learning, transforming the firelit night into both stage and classroom, where every gesture carried meaning and every shadow taught a story. The adults, in contrast, moved with a quiet confidence born of experience. Every motion was purposeful, a hand reaching for a bundle of herbs, a glance exchanged with a neighbor, a careful adjustment of seating around the fire. These gestures, subtle yet deliberate, carried weight far beyond the moment, reflecting a lifetime of accumulated knowledge and shared responsibility. Eyes met across the flames, conveying trust, warning, humor, and love without a single word. The tribe's social fabric was woven through these exchanges, binding each member into a network of interdependence that had been honed over countless generations. In this fleeting moment, the audience glimpses not only individuals but the invisible threads connecting them, threads that would persist even as the fire's warmth faded. Elders leaned close to the flames, their faces lined and weathered, maps of experience etched in every wrinkle and crease. The soft glow revealed scars of past struggles, faint lines of sorrow, and the deep grooves of wisdom. Their eyes, steady and knowing, scanned the circle, watching the younger members with pride, concern, and a quiet reverence for the continuity of life. Each elder carried a reservoir of memory, of hunts, of births, of storms weathered and seasons survived. Their presence reminded the tribe that the past lived alongside the present, embodied in the stories shared, the lessons taught, and the rituals performed. Even in silence, their influence was palpable, shaping the rhythm of movement, the cadence of speech, and the unspoken codes of care and responsibility that governed every interaction. Firelight danced across the features of the tribe in a mesmerizing, ever-shifting display. Eyes sparkled with reflection, lips curled in quiet smiles, and muscles tensed or relaxed according to the stories told or the music played. The interplay of light and shadow seemed almost magical, exaggerating expressions, emphasizing contrasts, and creating an intimate theater of emotion that could be read without words. Small details, a glint of a tooth, a line of worry on a brow, the way a child's hair caught the flickering flames, became significant, revealing the inner lives of those gathered. The fire transformed the ordinary into the extraordinary, turning a simple circle of people into a living tableau of humanity, rich with texture, depth, and emotion. Among them, the hunters and gatherers displayed subtle signs of readiness, their bodies attuned to movement, alert to any sign of change in the surrounding darkness. Muscles coiled with controlled tension, eyes sharp and attentive, yet their faces softened when they returned focus to the circle. They balanced the dualities of their existence, the need for vigilance against the imperatives of social bonding, the practical demands of survival against the spiritual and emotional significance of the evening. Each gesture, from adjusting a spear to sharing a nod with a companion, revealed a life lived in harmony with both danger and community, a delicate negotiation that required skill, instinct, and deep understanding. The children's laughter, delicate and fleeting, offered relief and contrast to the intensity of adult engagement. Moments of play punctuated the ritualized preparation, infusing the night with joy, spontaneity, and innocence. A child would dart forward to imitate a dance step, only to be gently guided back, and the resulting laughter rippled across the circle, softening the fire's glow with warmth and shared amusement. In this interplay of light, shadow, movement, and stillness, the audience begins to perceive a rhythm unique to the tribe, a living heartbeat that pulses through generations, blending play with learning, ceremony with everyday survival. The fire also revealed moments of intimacy and vulnerability. Hands clasped, heads leaned together, eyes met across distance with quiet affection. These gestures were understated yet profoundly human, reminding the audience that even in the midst of ritual and preparation, the tribe's members were individuals with complex emotions, desires, and histories. Each face told a story, whether of joy, sorrow, curiosity, or reflection. In the fleeting flicker of flame, nothing could be hidden. The fire illuminated not just skin and bone, but the essence of experience, memory, and presence. The smoke spiraling upward seemed to link the faces of the tribe to the stars above, merging the immediate and the eternal. As the audience observes, there is a sense that these faces are both fleeting and enduring, temporary in their corporeal form yet timeless in the stories, emotions, and traditions they carry. The visual interplay of human features against firelight and shadow becomes a meditation on connection, mortality, and identity. Every smile, every frown, every careful gesture contributes to a collective portrait of life at this precise moment, a moment that will soon pass, yet whose imprint remains indelible in memory. In this section, the audience is drawn deeply into the humanity of the tribe, feeling the intimacy of their interactions, the weight of their shared history, and the beauty of the moment illuminated by fire. The flickering light transforms ordinary features into carriers of narrative and emotion, making each glance, gesture, and expression a story in itself. The interplay of children, adults, and elders reveals the complexity of social bonds, the interdependence of community, and the fragile yet resilient nature of human life. By the end of this section, the viewer feels intimately connected to the tribe, understanding not only who they are but the depth of meaning embedded in every human face bathed in the glow of fire. The fire crackled, sending sparks spiraling upward like tiny celestial bodies escaping into the night sky. Its warmth reached into every corner of the clearing, dissolving shadows, revealing faces, and creating a sanctuary from the chill that crept across the land. The flames were alive, unpredictable yet familiar, a living presence around which the tribe had gathered for countless generations. Fire was more than warmth, it was rhythm, energy, and life itself, a heartbeat that pulsed through the tribe, uniting each member in silent synchronization. Its glow reflected in their eyes, making every glance, smile, and gesture appear larger, more vivid, and somehow sacred. Around the hearth, the tribe's elders tended the flames with practiced care, selecting twigs and branches, adjusting logs to maintain both heat and consistency. Their movements were deliberate, almost ritualistic, a dance of fire and intention that had been honed over lifetimes. Each ember that caught and leapt into the air was a reminder of life's fragility, its beauty, and the delicate balance between creation and destruction. The children watched with fascination, their small hands reaching instinctively toward the warmth, learning through observation the careful art of tending a fire. Even in play, their movements mirrored the elders, illustrating the continuity of knowledge, tradition, and responsibility. Fire was the centerpiece of communication, a silent yet eloquent language understood by all who lived beside it. The crackle of burning wood punctuated conversation, acting as a metronome for speech and song. Smoky tendrils carried stories upward, mixing with the night air, a bridge between the earthly and the divine. Songs and chants rose, synchronized with the flicker of flames, creating a layered experience where sound and light intertwined. Each note, each rhythm, resonated differently depending on the fire's mood, sometimes crackling sharply, sometimes glowing steadily, like the voice of a living companion reacting to the emotions of those who gathered around it. The hearth was a stage for memory. Around its glow, stories of ancestors, hunts, and ancient battles were retold, reinforcing identity and continuity. Faces in the firelight were transformed by imagination, the lines of age, fatigue, and labor shifted into expressions of mythic significance. Elders recounted tales with gestures, tone, and rhythm, their voices harmonizing with the natural cadence of the fire. Children listened with rapt attention, absorbing lessons of courage, loyalty, and survival. Even as the night deepened, the fire seemed to pulse with the collective heartbeat of the tribe, a living testament to the intertwined nature of human life, memory, and shared experience. The fire also served as a marker of emotional resonance, reflecting the mood of the circle. When laughter erupted, flames danced higher, shadows leapt with excitement, and the air seemed to vibrate with shared joy. When stories turned somber, the glow softened, embers smoldered low, and the quiet fell like a gentle mantle over the group. The fire mirrored the tribe's collective consciousness, creating a rhythm that guided both thought and action. In this way, the hearth was not simply a source of survival, it was a mirror of the human spirit, reflecting triumph, sorrow, curiosity, and awe in every flicker. Beyond warmth and ritual, fire was an instrument of transformation. Raw food became sustenance, cold stones became tools after heating, the night became illuminated, rendering the unknown familiar and navigable. It also provided protection, a barrier against the unseen creatures of the darkness, a deterrent for predators, and a psychological anchor against fear. Its presence offered comfort, a reminder that life, however fleeting, could still be celebrated, defended, and nurtured. To the tribe, fire was a living entity, one that demanded respect and attentiveness, rewarding care with the light of survival and the glow of shared experience. The interplay between fire and environment created a symphony of senses. Sparks drifted upward, dancing like tiny fireflies against the dark canopy of stars. The scent of burning wood mingled with the earthy aroma of the forest floor, herbs, and smoke, creating a layered olfactory experience that evoked memory, presence, and reflection. Heat radiated unevenly, warming one side while leaving shadows cool, reinforcing the awareness of light and dark, safety and danger. The fire's sound, the crackle of twigs, the pop of sap, the gentle roar as flames licked the air, was ever present, grounding the tribe in rhythm, continuity, and life. Fire also held symbolic significance, connecting the tribe to the intangible and unseen. It was a bridge between the known and the unknown, the living and the ancestral, the present and the timeless. Flame seemed to respond to intention, rising higher during moments of collective emotion, as if acknowledging the human presence that nurtured them. The circle around the fire became a sacred space, where stories, knowledge, and emotion were concentrated, where the pulse of the community became tangible, visible, and felt. Within this glow, humans were both small and monumental, fragile and enduring, defined by their connection to one another and to the living flame that illuminated their lives. As the night progressed, the fire became a teacher, guiding attention, shaping movement, and dictating the tempo of the gathering. Every flicker, every spark, offered lessons in observation, patience, and reverence. Children learned to respect its power, elders modeled care, and every member participated in sustaining this vital presence. Fire, in essence, was the heartbeat of the tribe, not just a tool, but a living entity whose rhythm dictated social cohesion, survival, and spiritual grounding. In this intimate interplay of warmth, light, shadow, and sound, the audience witnesses the essence of human connection distilled into a single phenomenon. Fire was not only survival, it was identity, ritual, memory, and continuity. It was a companion that had nurtured the tribe for generations, a living thread linking the past to the present. In its glow, the tribe found not only light and warmth but meaning, grounding, and the pulse of life itself, preparing them for the extraordinary night that lay ahead, the dance that would mark the culmination of tradition and the delicate, fragile beauty of existence. The evening air carried a peculiar energy, different from any ordinary night the tribe had experienced. There was a subtle tension beneath the usual warmth of firelight and chatter, a sense that the world was poised on the edge of something profound. The leaves whispered more urgently in the breeze, and the shadows seemed to stretch farther, as if reaching toward the unknown. Even the children, who normally played freely around the edges of the circle, moved with a heightened awareness, sensing the weight of the moment in a way they could not fully name. Something ancient stirred in the rhythm of the night, a pulse that resonated deep in the soil, the trees, and in the hearts of all who had gathered. Preparations for the evening were meticulous. Elders moved with deliberate care, arranging logs and small stones around the fire, creating a circle that would serve as the stage for the night's ritual. Every placement was symbolic, rooted in generations of knowledge, intuition, and reverence. The tribe had performed countless dances, told countless stories, and celebrated countless nights together, but tonight carried a different gravity. It was as if the land itself acknowledged the uniqueness of this gathering, with the river whispering against the bank, insects humming in heightened resonance, and the distant mountain standing sentinel over the clearing. The scene was alive, a living canvas, and every participant felt the weight of its beauty and fragility. The tribe moved in quiet coordination. Hands brushed against one another in subtle gestures of guidance, eyes met in fleeting, meaningful glances, and each motion carried unspoken instructions. There was an awareness, almost instinctual, that tonight's dance required harmony not only between individuals but between the community and the natural world surrounding them. Tools, instruments, and small talismans were handled with care, each imbued with meaning that transcended the practical. Stones that marked sacred positions were adjusted just so, branches were shifted to balance shadows and light, and the fire itself was coaxed to a steady glow, neither too fierce nor too meek. Every action reinforced the notion that this night was different, and that the consequences of attentiveness and care were both immediate and enduring. Sounds carried a heightened presence in the atmosphere. The gentle murmur of voices blended seamlessly with the rhythmic tapping of sticks and the soft rustling of leaves. Even silence was purposeful, punctuating the movements of the tribe with moments of reflection and anticipation. The natural chorus of the night, crickets, distant owls, the faint trickle of water, interwove with human rhythm, creating a layered soundscape that was both grounding and ethereal. In this intricate interplay of natural and human-made noises, the tribe existed not as separate from the world around them, but as a part of it, attuned to its subtleties, responsive to its cues, and enriched by its presence. Eyes, faces, and gestures were more expressive than usual, heightened by awareness and reverence. Elders watched with steady, calculating attention, sensing the subtle energies that moved through the clearing. Their expressions carried both pride and apprehension, knowing that the events of the night were unparalleled in their significance. Adults conveyed guidance and reassurance through small touches, nods, and the careful modulation of voice, ensuring that each younger member understood the importance of attentiveness, respect, and presence. Children, in turn, absorbed the signals intuitively, participating in the unfolding ritual with a mixture of curiosity, excitement, and solemnity. The circle pulsed with collective awareness, a living entity formed from human consciousness, ritual, and the ambient vitality of the surrounding land. The fire was central, as it always had been, but its role tonight felt more profound. Flames licked the night air with unusual vigor, casting intricate patterns across faces and the surrounding landscape. Sparks rose in gentle arcs, like tiny messengers ascending to the heavens, each one carrying the memory and intention of the community. Shadows danced more vividly, elongating and contracting in rhythm with both the movement of the people and the flicker of the fire. The hearth was no longer just a source of warmth or light, it had become a conduit of energy, a mirror reflecting the collective heartbeat of the tribe, the night, and perhaps even the ancestors whose presence lingered in the ritual space. The emotional tension was palpable. While the evening maintained its familiar structure of gathering, preparation, and song, there was an underlying recognition of rarity, even fragility. Elders whispered to one another in low tones, recalling other nights of celebration and comparing them in memory to the present. They spoke of patterns, omens, and signs, subtle acknowledgments that this night carried weight beyond the ordinary. Adults subtly guided movements, adjusted gestures, and modulated voices to maintain harmony, fully aware that any disruption could ripple across the circle. Even the youngest participants, sensitive to these energies, mirrored the mood, exhibiting a balance of excitement and solemnity unusual for their age. The anticipation of the dance, the central ritual of the evening, permeated every breath, every movement, and every glance. The circle around the fire became a stage, a sacred arena where history, memory, and the living moment converged. The tribe's interactions were charged with purpose, hands adjusted positions, instruments were checked, and glances exchanged that conveyed both instruction and affirmation. Each individual became acutely aware of their role, small yet essential, in sustaining the coherence and integrity of the gathering. In this collective mindfulness, the ordinary became extraordinary, and the night, already significant, began to approach the transcendent. As darkness deepened, the boundaries between the physical and spiritual seemed to blur. Firelight flickered across trees, illuminating textures and forms that appeared alive with meaning. The breeze carried whispers that might have been spirits, ancestors, or merely imagination, but the tribe perceived them as part of the sacred tapestry of the evening. In this heightened perception, every detail, sound, scent, shadow, movement, was charged with significance. The land itself seemed to participate in the ritual, supporting, witnessing, and perhaps even guiding the unfolding events. The night had transformed from ordinary to extraordinary, a space where the tribe could commune with each other, the ancestors, and the world around them in ways rarely experienced. In this extraordinary atmosphere, the audience is drawn into a night of heightened awareness, emotional depth, and ceremonial resonance. The combination of fire, shadow, ritual preparation, and attentive observation creates a sense of suspense and wonder, marking this night as unique in the life of the tribe. The narrative tension, grounded in sensory richness and interpersonal dynamics, sets the stage for the climactic dance that will follow, ensuring that every viewer feels the weight, beauty, and fragile perfection of a night unlike any other. A subtle hush fell over the clearing as the night deepened, and the firelight flickered against faces etched with attention, reverence, and unspoken memory. In that stillness, the presence of ancestors felt almost tangible, carried in the crackle of embers, the rustle of leaves, and the whispering wind that threaded through the trees. The tribe had long believed that their forebears lingered, invisible yet attentive, watching over the circle of life, guiding hands, movements, and choices with gentle insistence. Stories passed from elder to child told of those who had walked these lands long before the current generation, whose footprints and lessons remained etched not only in memory but in the very contours of the forest, the riverbeds, and the hills that shaped daily life. Tonight, this presence was more palpable than ever, pressing softly yet insistently against the edges of perception, merging past and present in a delicate balance of ritual and awareness. The elders spoke softly, invoking the memory of those who had come before. Each utterance, carefully chosen and deliberate, carried layers of meaning. Words became bridges, connecting the living to the departed, the immediate to the timeless. The younger members listened intently, sensing the weight of history in every syllable. Some words were literal, recounting events of hunts, challenges, or triumphs, while others were symbolic, carrying the essence of lessons distilled over countless seasons. Even when the stories seemed fragmented, punctuated by pauses, gestures, or silences, their significance was not lost. It resonated in the shared attention of the tribe, in the subtle nods, and in the quiet breath that followed each declaration. The ancestors' whispers were not merely conveyed through speech. The movement of shadows across the ground seemed to echo past rituals, the flicker of flames mimicking gestures performed long ago. Patterns in the stars above mirrored constellations associated with specific myths, hunts, or seasonal shifts. Every sound, the crack of a log, the distant call of an owl, the low hum of the river, was interpreted as a message, a subtle reminder that the present moment was inseparable from the lineage of those who had come before. To the tribe, life was a continuum, an unbroken thread linking every heartbeat to generations that preceded it. Observing this, the audience begins to understand that memory was not abstract but a living, breathing force, shaping thought, action, and perception in ways both intimate and communal. The dance, which had been anticipated for hours, was deeply tied to this ancestral presence. Elders gestured to the younger members, showing them the precise movements, the alignment of the body, and the rhythm of steps that had been performed for generations. Each motion was infused with meaning, a symbolic reenactment of events, virtues, and lessons from the past. As the children and adults prepared, the firelight illuminated expressions of concentration, reverence, and subtle awe, highlighting the profound significance of participating in a ritual that connected them to lives long vanished yet intimately present. In this way, the ancestors' whisper was both metaphorical and experiential, shaping action as directly as it shaped thought. Symbols and artifacts played a crucial role in conveying this ancestral dialogue. Stones arranged in deliberate formations, wooden staffs carved with intricate patterns, and the careful placement of branches or animal skins all served as reminders of ancestral presence and guidance. Each item held a memory, a story, or a moral, encoded over generations through practice and observation. Handling these objects required respect and understanding, a tactile engagement with history that reinforced the tribe's sense of continuity. Even small errors or deviations in placement or movement were noted silently by the elders, teaching lessons about attentiveness, responsibility, and the consequences of action. Through such engagement, memory was not static but dynamic, a living conversation between past and present, conveyed through ritualized attention to detail and deliberate practice. The emotional resonance of this awareness was profound. A sense of humility, awe, and even fear infused the circle, creating a psychological space in which the ordinary boundaries between life and death, past and present, blurred. Children who had laughed and played earlier now stood still, attentive, sensing without words the enormity of the night's purpose. Adults moved with careful deliberation, their bodies attuned to both the rhythms of the ritual and the perceived presence of ancestors in the flames, the stars, and the surrounding forest. Even the fire itself seemed to respond, casting shapes and shadows that mirrored gestures from generations past, reinforcing the impression that the tribe was not alone but accompanied by countless unseen eyes, hearts, and hands. Music, chants, and rhythmic movement amplified the whisper of the ancestors. Low hums, drumbeats, and melodic calls intertwined with the crackling fire, creating a sonic tapestry that resonated deeply within the clearing. These sounds were carefully modulated, sometimes soft and introspective, other times louder, assertive, and commanding attention. Each variation in tone and volume was designed to honor specific ancestors, events, or virtues, embedding cultural memory in a sensory experience that transcended verbal communication. The participants, in turn, internalized these cues, responding instinctively with gestures, steps, and expressions that mirrored ancestral teachings and reinforced communal cohesion. In the interplay of ritual, fire, shadow, and sound, the presence of ancestors became a palpable force. The audience witnesses not only a cultural tradition but an intricate psychological and emotional network that binds individuals to each other and to their collective history. The ancestors' whisper is both literal and metaphorical, existing in sound, gesture, and memory, shaping the night, the dance, and the perceptions of all who gather. By connecting to these unseen guides, the tribe situates itself within a lineage far larger than any single individual, emphasizing continuity, responsibility, and the enduring importance of honoring those who came before. As the night progressed and the fire's glow intensified, this awareness deepened. Participants moved with heightened attentiveness, their gestures precise and meaningful. The ancestors' whisper was no longer background, it was central, guiding thought, action, and emotion in a seamless dialogue that transcended time. The sense of continuity, of being watched over and supported, infused every step, every glance, and every breath with significance. In this way, the night became a living conversation between the present and the past, a delicate but potent reminder that life is a continuum, memory is alive, and human experience is inseparable from the guidance of those who have come before. The night carried a rhythm beyond the crackle of the fire, a cadence shaped by generations of survival and adaptation. As the flames leapt and spiraled, the tribe began to hum, chant, and sing in low, resonant tones that seemed to vibrate with the very earth beneath their feet. These songs were not mere entertainment, they were repositories of knowledge, memory, and guidance, encoding essential truths about hunting, foraging, navigation, and community cohesion. Each note, each pause, carried practical and symbolic weight, reinforcing lessons learned over countless seasons while also celebrating the resilience and ingenuity of the people who had lived and thrived in this landscape for generations. The elders led the singing, their voices deep, steady, and imbued with authority. Their melodies echoed across the clearing, weaving between trees, glinting off the river, and carrying far into the surrounding forest. The tones were deliberate, their fluctuations and modulations purposeful, designed to capture attention, sustain focus, and create an emotional resonance that connected all listeners to a shared experience. Children followed the rhythm instinctively, mimicking cadences, learning the melodies as one would learn survival skills, absorbing both content and form through repetition and imitation. In this way, music became an intimate teacher, shaping knowledge and behavior in a manner simultaneously practical and profound. Songs carried essential information. Through lyrics, chants, and intonation, hunters could communicate the presence of game, the approach of predators, or the nuances of the terrain. Certain patterns indicated safe paths, hidden water sources, or locations of edible plants. Others encoded strategies for cooperation, warning signals, or instructions for responding to emergencies. These musical codes were embedded seamlessly into rhythm and melody, ensuring they could be recalled quickly under pressure, even in moments of stress or danger. To an outside observer, the singing might appear purely ceremonial, but to the tribe, it was functional, vital, and inseparable from the practical demands of survival. The emotional power of the songs was equally profound. As voices intertwined and harmonized, the firelight seemed to respond, flames leaping higher in moments of heightened intensity, casting dancing shadows across faces filled with focus, reverence, and awe. Laughter and joy punctuated certain refrains, while quieter, slower passages evoked reflection and reverence for ancestors, land, and life itself. Through this interplay, music became both a tool and a mirror, reflecting the tribe's collective emotional state while also guiding it, reinforcing unity, resilience, and a sense of shared purpose. Every sound, from the softest hum to the most emphatic chant, resonated with multiple layers of meaning, linking survival, memory, and spiritual awareness into a single, flowing experience. The songs were also profoundly social. As each member participated, the rhythm and tone aligned the group, creating cohesion, synchrony, and a palpable sense of belonging. Even subtle deviations, an offbeat step, a hesitation in voice, were immediately noticed and corrected, not as punishment but as guidance, a reminder that survival depended on attentiveness, coordination, and trust. In this way, singing and movement became intertwined, producing a dynamic, living practice in which every individual's action contributed to the strength and resilience of the whole. The fire, meanwhile, served as both focal point and conductor, its pulse echoing the rhythm of the human voices, binding the auditory, visual, and emotional dimensions into one coherent whole. Children's voices carried a special resonance, blending innocence with attentive mimicry. Their attempts, often faltering at first, were met with encouragement and gentle correction from elders, creating a subtle pedagogy rooted in participation and observation rather than abstract instruction. Through repetition, rhythm, and communal reinforcement, the melodies, chants, and songs became internalized, ensuring that knowledge essential to survival was preserved across generations. In this way, music was simultaneously a practical guide, a cultural archive, and an emotional anchor, connecting past, present, and future through sound, movement, and shared attention. The spiritual dimensions of these songs were equally rich. Certain chants invoked ancestors, calling on their guidance and protection, while others honored the land, the animals, or natural forces believed to influence human life. The fire became a mirror of these intentions, its flames responding to emotion, focus, and collective energy. Sparks shot upward as if carrying prayers or intentions to the heavens, blending the tangible and intangible into a single, luminous experience. Shadows created by dancing flames echoed ritual patterns, allowing the tribe to see the living embodiment of their stories and ancestral connections reflected around them. Through these interactions, the night transformed into a sacred space where survival, celebration, memory, and spiritual connection coexisted seamlessly. Even the natural world participated in this musical tapestry. Crickets, owls, and distant predators contributed background rhythms, their sounds absorbed and woven into the human chorus. The river's gentle flow provided a persistent undercurrent, a sonic canvas that supported, contrasted, and enhanced the tribe's vocal expressions. Trees responded to the vibrations of sound, their leaves trembling in subtle harmony, creating a tactile feedback loop between environment and human presence. In this manner, songs of survival extended beyond human boundaries, becoming a conversation between people and place, memory and present, instruction and artistry. As the night deepened, the ritual of singing intensified. Melodies grew more complex, movements more intricate, and attention more focused. Adults and children alike lost themselves in the shared experience, yet remained acutely aware of its purpose, preservation, instruction, and communion. Song served as both anchor and vessel, conveying emotion, encoding knowledge, and reinforcing connection to land, ancestors, and community. In every note, there was meaning, in every rhythm, a lesson, in every pause, a reflection on the impermanence of life and the enduring strength of shared memory. Through this intimate, layered practice, the tribe's existence became inseparable from the songs themselves. They were tools of survival, instruments of cultural transmission, mirrors of collective emotion, and bridges to the past. As firelight danced upon faces and shadows stretched across the clearing, the audience perceives that these melodies are more than sound, they are living, breathing expressions of human continuity, resilience, and the profound interdependence of life, memory, and environment. As the fire's glow pulsed against the night, the clearing transformed into a living tableau of light and shadow. Every movement of the tribe created shifting patterns across the ground, trees, and faces, an intricate dance of illumination and darkness that seemed to breathe alongside the people. Shadows stretched and recoiled with the flicker of flames, bending the familiar shapes of bodies into ephemeral forms that were at once recognizable and mysterious. Each spark that leapt from the hearth carried with it the potential to illuminate or vanish, a reminder of the fleeting nature of the present moment and the fragile beauty that defined the night. For the tribe, these visual contrasts were not mere aesthetics, they were a lens through which meaning, emotion, and story were conveyed. Children's laughter punctuated the shadows, small bursts of sound that blended seamlessly with the crackling fire and the subtle movements of the forest. Their tiny feet scuffed the earth, disturbing dust that caught in the firelight and created a shimmering haze around their playful forms. They chased the sparks with instinctive fascination, weaving in and out of pools of shadow, embodying both curiosity and caution. Each stumble, each joyful leap, became part of the evolving narrative of the night, a spontaneous rhythm that contrasted with the deliberate movements of adults and elders. The interplay of intention and spontaneity created a rich tapestry of human activity, where chaos and order existed simultaneously, reflecting the delicate balance of life itself. Adults moved with measured grace, their gestures deliberate, expressive, and attuned to the energy of both fire and shadow. Each step, each adjustment of posture, contributed to a choreography passed down through generations, a ritualized embodiment of survival, memory, and connection. The fire's light accentuated the contours of muscles, the line of a cheek, or the curve of a hand, transforming ordinary movements into visual poetry. The shadows cast by these movements amplified their significance, elongating and multiplying gestures, as though the ancestors themselves were participating, echoing the actions of the living. This constant interplay of light and dark became a narrative in its own right, a visual storytelling medium that complemented song, chant, and motion. The sparks rising from the fire were equally symbolic, each a fleeting emblem of life, memory, and potential. They drifted upward unpredictably, carried by heat and wind, illuminating brief arcs before disappearing into the night. Elders watched these sparks carefully, noting the way they flickered against branches or danced across faces, interpreting their movements as omens, guidance, or silent messages from the unseen world. Younger members, less attuned to subtle readings, experienced the sparks primarily as wonder and delight, yet even in play they absorbed the underlying lessons, the impermanence of life, the connection between effort and result, and the necessity of attentiveness to the smallest details in a complex environment. Every spark was both practical and symbolic, a living thread in the tapestry of ritual and survival. Sound intertwined with the visual spectacle. The fire crackled and popped, punctuating the dance of light and shadow with dynamic punctuation. Low murmurs of conversation, gentle laughter, and quiet instruction blended with the natural chorus of night, the hum of insects, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, to create an immersive acoustic environment. These auditory cues reinforced the visual rhythm of sparks and shadows, guiding movement, signaling shifts in focus, and embedding meaning in every moment. Together, light, shadow, and sound created a multisensory narrative that engaged every sense, enveloping the tribe in a heightened state of presence and awareness. The surrounding forest participated as well. Trees, rocks, and underbrush absorbed and reflected the firelight in subtle ways, creating depth and texture that shifted constantly as the flames danced. Wind moved through branches, sending ripples across shadowed ground, and every flutter of leaf or movement of animal added to the dynamic interplay between human and environment. The tribe had learned to read these interactions, interpreting changes in light and shadow as signs of environmental shifts, approaching weather, or the presence of animals. In this way, the night became a living, interactive space, where the natural world was both stage and participant, guiding action and imbuing it with meaning. Emotion was heightened through this interplay. The tribe experienced awe, anticipation, and reflection simultaneously, responding instinctively to the visual and auditory dynamics around them. The firelight illuminated both joy and solemnity, creating moments of intimacy and collective resonance. Elders' eyes gleamed with pride and nostalgia, adults balanced focus with quiet exhilaration, and children oscillated between play and reverent attention. Shadows elongated and merged, symbolically linking past, present, and future in a visual representation of the continuum of life and memory. Sparks and shadow became metaphors for impermanence and legacy, their transient beauty reinforcing the preciousness of the current moment. The physical choreography of the night mirrored its emotional depth. Movements were precise yet fluid, rhythmic yet adaptive, guided by both tradition and intuition. Hands, feet, and bodies aligned in patterns that reflected hunting strategies, agricultural knowledge, or ritualized storytelling, each step informed by countless generations of observation and practice. The flickering fire amplified the drama of these gestures, creating a sense of movement that extended beyond the corporeal, transforming the clearing into a theater of light, shadow, and human intention. Observers, both within the tribe and beyond, could perceive layers of meaning encoded in motion, perception, and interaction, creating a rich narrative tapestry accessible on multiple levels. As the night progressed, sparks and shadows coalesced into moments of revelation. A fleeting shadow might evoke the image of an ancestor, a remembered hunt, or a symbolic moral. A rising spark could be read as a call to attention, a sign of impending movement, or a reminder of impermanence. In this way, the environment, the fire, and the tribe's collective awareness became interwoven, producing a holistic experience that transcended the ordinary. The audience witnesses not just a visual spectacle but a profound interaction between human culture, emotion, and the natural world, where every flicker of light and every elongated shadow carry significance. By the end of the section, the interplay of sparks and shadows leaves a lasting impression. The night is alive, dynamic, and emotionally resonant. Fire, movement, and darkness are not mere backdrops but active participants in the storytelling, reflecting the tribe's knowledge, memory, and emotional states. The audience is drawn into a heightened sense of presence, understanding that this is not simply a scene of survival or ritual, but a meditation on impermanence, human ingenuity, and the delicate balance between light, shadow, and life itself. The night's dance had begun in earnest, and with it, every movement of the tribe took on ritualized significance. Each step, gesture, and sway was imbued with layers of meaning, tracing patterns that were both practical and symbolic, practical in that they reinforced survival skills and symbolic in that they encoded ancestral memory. Elders moved at the circle's perimeter, guiding subtle shifts in posture, rhythm, and gaze, while children attempted to mirror their motions, learning through imitation the choreography of both life and lineage. Every motion was deliberate, yet fluid, creating a tapestry of movement that resonated with the pulse of the fire and the cadence of the night itself. The choreography of the dance was a language in motion. A sweep of an arm could indicate the approach of a predator, a crouch or leap might convey strategy for hunting, while rhythmic footwork could encode timing for cooperative work. Beyond these practical functions, the motions were carriers of spiritual and cultural memory, each gesture rehearsed over generations yet renewed in the immediacy of the present. The audience can perceive a duality here. While the tribe dances for survival, for preparation, and for communal cohesion, they also dance for remembrance, honoring ancestors, land, and shared identity. In this way, movement becomes a bridge between the temporal and the eternal. Firelight played a central role in magnifying the significance of each motion. Shadows stretched, contracted, and multiplied across faces, the ground, and surrounding trees, creating a visual echo of the choreography. A raised hand might cast an elongated silhouette that reached toward the stars, a crouched figure could generate multiple layered shapes on the ground, and spinning movements produced whirls of light and darkness that seemed to animate the clearing itself. Sparks leaping from the hearth punctuated movements with visual punctuation, highlighting the ritual's drama and amplifying the sense that every action was watched, remembered, and understood. In this interplay of light, shadow, and motion, the dance transcended the corporeal, becoming a living narrative in which every participant, every gesture, and every reflection contributed to a holistic story. The spiritual dimension of movement was undeniable. Each step carried intent, each sway of the body a subtle invocation of ancestral guidance. Elders whispered invocations or softly hummed melodies in coordination with motion, reinforcing the connection between sound, gesture, and memory. Children responded intuitively, aligning their bodies with both rhythm and symbolic meaning, participating in a continuum of knowledge that had been transmitted for countless generations. In these moments, the dance was more than expression or celebration, it was a conversation with the past, a negotiation with present circumstances, and a preparation for the uncertain days to come. Every motion was a lesson, a reminder, and a call to awareness. Coordination among participants was critical. The dance demanded attentiveness, responsiveness, and unity. Slight missteps could disrupt the rhythm, obscure the intended message of a gesture, or break the continuity of ritual. Therefore, each tribe member was attuned to the movements of others, adjusting timing, angle, and intensity in real time. This attentiveness fostered an intimate sense of connection, reinforcing social bonds and highlighting the interdependence of individual and collective. Observers of the ritual witness a harmony that is simultaneously mechanical, emotional, and spiritual, a living testament to the sophistication and adaptability of early human social structures. Objects and adornments enhanced the narrative power of movement. Staves carved with ancestral symbols, beads, feathers, and painted faces all interacted with the motion of the body and the flickering firelight. A feather lifted in a gesture might symbolize wind or flight, a painted line along an arm could convey lineage or accomplishment, and a staff raised or tilted might narrate a story of struggle or triumph. In this way, the dance was layered, its meaning enriched by visual and tactile symbolism. Motion was never isolated, it interacted with materials, firelight, and shadows to produce a complex semiotic system in which every detail carried weight. The audience can perceive the psychological depth of this ritualized movement. Participation required concentration, mindfulness, and emotional investment. Elders guided subtly, using eyes, gestures, or whispers to ensure continuity, while adults balanced focus with expressiveness, and children oscillated between learning and intuitive improvisation. This multi-generational engagement reinforced both instruction and memory, ensuring that the dance functioned as a repository of survival skills, cultural knowledge, and emotional regulation. In essence, motion became pedagogy, performance, and remembrance simultaneously, a living archive of human experience. Sound synchronized with motion, creating a multisensory experience. Rhythmic clapping, stomping, chants, and songs aligned with gestures, each reinforcing the meaning of movement. The pulse of the fire added a secondary beat, while ambient sounds of the forest, the river, and distant wildlife interacted with human-produced rhythm, creating a layered acoustic environment. The integration of these auditory cues ensured coordination, reinforced memory, and heightened emotional engagement, demonstrating that the dance was not merely visual or symbolic but a comprehensive, immersive practice engaging body, mind, and environment. Emotion permeated every motion. Participants expressed joy, reverence, anticipation, and respect through gesture, pace, and rhythm. A deliberate pause might communicate reflection or mourning, a rapid sequence of movements could signal energy, triumph, or urgency, and a subtle tilt of the head or hand could denote communication with unseen forces. The audience experiences this as an orchestration of human feeling expressed in corporeal form, where the body itself becomes a canvas for emotion, memory, and communal identity. The fire remained central, both illuminating and responding to motion. Shadows elongated, collided, and merged across the clearing, creating complex visual echoes of gestures. Sparks punctuated leaps and sways, while smoke drifted and swirled, adding depth and texture to the unfolding visual narrative. Movement, light, and shadow formed a triad, a living choreography in which each element reinforced and enhanced the others. In this dynamic interplay, the dance became a living story, in which survival, culture, emotion, and history converged seamlessly. By the end of this section, the audience understands that ritualized movement is more than aesthetic or ceremonial, it is an integrated system of survival, teaching, remembrance, and emotional resonance. Every gesture, every step, and every sway carries meaning, connecting the present to the past and embedding knowledge for the future. The tribe's dance is both tangible and ethereal, a performance of human resilience, continuity, and the intricate interplay of body, mind, and environment. As the night deepened, the circle around the fire seemed to shrink, drawing every member of the tribe closer to the hearth and to one another. The flames acted as a magnetic center, pulling faces, hands, and bodies into an intimate formation that radiated both warmth and shared purpose. Each person adjusted subtly, shifting closer to the group, instinctively aware that proximity was not merely physical but symbolic. The closer the circle, the stronger the sense of unity, protection, and collective consciousness. The shrinking of the circle was more than habit, it was a gesture of trust, connection, and acknowledgement that survival, both practical and spiritual, depended on cohesion. The elders' eyes swept the group continuously, monitoring not just the positions of bodies but the emotional currents within the circle. Small cues, a subtle glance, a gesture of hesitation, or a shift in posture, were noted and responded to with guidance, creating a delicate balance between individual expression and collective harmony. Adults mediated this flow, adjusting their own movements, offering hands to steady children, and ensuring that rhythm and presence remained uninterrupted. Children, in turn, sensed the subtle interplay, moving with a combination of curiosity, imitation, and reverence. The circle's tightening reflected not only spatial proximity but the consolidation of shared intent, a visual and physical manifestation of emotional and cognitive alignment. As the firelight flickered across faces, the interplay of shadow and illumination became more pronounced, emphasizing the interconnectedness of participants. Shadows stretched toward one another, overlapping in ways that created a visual echo of the tightening social bond. Each individual's presence reinforced the sense of the group as an organism, a living, breathing entity whose survival depended on synchronization, attentiveness, and shared understanding. Sparks rising from the hearth punctuated moments of transition, illuminating expressions, gestures, and subtle interactions that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. In this way, proximity became both a practical necessity and a symbolic statement. The closer the circle, the stronger the community. Movement within the circle followed an intricate choreography, subtle yet deliberate, designed to reinforce collective cohesion. Participants adjusted the orientation of their bodies, the angle of limbs, and the rhythm of footwork to synchronize with one another. Elders subtly directed this alignment, ensuring that the circle maintained both stability and dynamic energy. Even minor deviations were addressed with a gentle touch, a whispered instruction, or a corrective gesture, reinforcing the principle that individual attentiveness contributed to the strength and fluidity of the group. In this way, the circle functioned as both spatial and social scaffolding, a framework through which survival, ritual, and memory were enacted simultaneously. The sensory environment intensified as the circle tightened. The sound of collective movement, the shuffle of feet, the soft rustle of garments, the low hum of song, merged into a unified rhythm that resonated with the crackle and pop of the fire. Scent carried across the clearing, from smoke and earth to subtle hints of sweat and breath, creating an olfactory tapestry that reinforced intimacy and attentiveness. Every sense became heightened, every detail observed and integrated, and every participant attuned to the subtle fluctuations in energy, mood, and movement. In this sensory immersion, the tightening circle was experienced not only physically but emotionally, cognitively, and spiritually. The psychological impact of the circle's contraction was profound. Proximity heightened awareness, intensified emotional resonance, and reinforced shared responsibility. Adults and elders modeled focus, calm, and attentiveness, and their example resonated in children, fostering both learning and adaptation. Trust was palpable, each person relied on the others for rhythm, guidance, and the subtle cues that governed both ritual and survival. This shared reliance amplified the sense of belonging and purpose, creating an almost tangible field of collective consciousness that enveloped the tribe and elevated the ritual beyond mere action. The fire remained the magnetic center, its light and heat dictating the geometry and energy of the circle. Flames licked upward, casting dancing shadows that merged with and mirrored the human forms. Sparks leapt into the air, occasionally drifting into the darkness, momentarily illuminating expressions of awe, concentration, or reverence. The visual interplay of light and shadow reinforced the symbolic and emotional significance of proximity, emphasizing that the circle was not just a formation but a dynamic, living system in which fire, human presence, and environment were in constant dialogue. Symbolic elements became more pronounced as the circle tightened. Stones, staffs, and painted markings aligned with the fire, participants, and ritual gestures, reinforcing meaning through spatial relationships. Each placement, movement, and adjustment conveyed both practical and spiritual information, ensuring that the circle was not only a container of people but a vessel for memory, intention, and ancestral presence. Elders monitored these alignments continuously, maintaining coherence while allowing room for expressive variation. Children absorbed these cues intuitively, learning that ritual practice demanded both attention and adaptation, that tradition was both structured and alive. Emotion swelled as the circle contracted. Laughter, song, and chant echoed more intimately, blending with the natural sounds of the night in a complex, layered harmony. Moments of solemnity were amplified, grief or reflection becoming more immediate and shared. Proximity created resonance, joy became collective, and tension was collectively diffused. Each heartbeat seemed amplified by the closeness of others, creating a rhythm that pulsed through the group like a shared lifeline. The circle became a mirror of the tribe's inner state, its contraction magnifying both emotional depth and social cohesion. As the night progressed, the tightening circle served as preparation for the culmination of ritual and dance. It focused attention, reinforced coordination, and intensified sensory perception, ensuring that participants were fully present for the most critical moments to come. The audience can perceive the psychological and cultural significance. Proximity is not merely convenience, it is embodiment of trust, unity, and collective resilience. Every movement, glance, and breath contributes to the integrity of the circle, producing an experience that is simultaneously practical, emotional, and spiritual. By the end of this section, the tightening circle has become a powerful symbol of the tribe's cohesion, awareness, and shared purpose. It illustrates that survival and ritual are inseparable from proximity, trust, and attentiveness, and that human connection, when fully realized, can transform a simple gathering into an experience of profound continuity, reflection, and shared vitality. The fire at the center of the circle seemed to take on a life of its own, its flames twisting, leaping, and undulating in a rhythm that mirrored the movements of the tribe surrounding it. Sparks spiraled upward like miniature stars, each carrying the possibility of illumination or disappearance, a visual echo of the transient and eternal woven together. The warmth radiated not just physically but psychologically, creating a magnetic center that drew eyes, attention, and intention. To the tribe, the fire was more than fuel or light, it was a living entity, a participant in the night's ritual, capable of reflecting emotion, signaling energy, and amplifying both movement and meaning. As the elders guided the circle, their gestures were accentuated by the firelight. Hands lifted, arms extended, and bodies arched, all casting elongated shadows across the clearing that danced in synchronization with the flames. Every motion became an interplay of light and shadow, a choreography in which the fire was as much a performer as any human participant. Children watched in fascination, eyes wide, trying to mimic movements while also mesmerized by the unpredictable arcs of sparks and the flickering silhouettes. Their attempts were imperfect but instinctively attuned to the flow of rhythm, light, and energy, showing that even the youngest participants were internalizing the lessons of connection, focus, and reverence. The fire's colors shifted subtly as the night wore on. Deep oranges, reds, and golds mingled with hints of blue and white at the flame tips, creating a dynamic palette that illuminated the circle in constantly changing tones. These variations were not merely aesthetic, they influenced mood, perception, and movement. Brighter sections encouraged bold gestures, higher energy, and expressive leaps, while deeper shadows prompted introspection, slower steps, and moments of reflection. The interplay of flame and human action created a feedback loop, movement influenced light, light guided motion, and both together shaped emotional and spiritual experience. In this way, the fire became both mirror and guide, revealing and enhancing the dynamics of the night. Sounds intertwined with the visual spectacle. The crackle and pop of burning logs punctuated movement, while sparks landing on dry earth or leaves produced subtle percussive accents. Low hums, chants, and songs blended seamlessly with these natural rhythms, forming a layered soundscape in which every auditory cue carried significance. The fire's dynamics modulated attention, sudden pops drew gaze, softer embers reinforced continuity, and the rising and falling intensity of flame paralleled the tribe's physical exertion. The combination of sound and motion created a total immersion, a sensory experience in which fire, human action, and ambient nature merged into a singular, living performance. Emotion was heightened through interaction with the fire. Participants expressed awe, reverence, excitement, and solemnity in response to the flame's behavior. Adults and elders subtly modulated their gestures to align with the fire's fluctuations, maintaining balance while amplifying expression. Children instinctively mirrored these responses, learning to read not only the rhythms of human action but the cues embedded in environmental phenomena. Each flicker or surge became an emotional signal, guiding attention, shaping perception, and reinforcing the communal experience. The fire was simultaneously unpredictable and controllable, a dynamic teacher of responsiveness, adaptation, and respect. The fire also served as a symbolic bridge between past and present. Sparks rising into the night sky were interpreted as messages to ancestors, echoes of memory and intention transcending time. Shadows projected on the ground and surrounding trees reflected ancestral forms, imagined or remembered, reminding participants that they were part of a continuum stretching back through countless generations. Ritual gestures reinforced this connection. A raised hand aligned with a flickering flame could signify invocation, respect, or gratitude, while a synchronized sweep of motion mirrored patterns long performed by forebears. In these moments, fire was more than physical, it became a vessel of memory, a conduit for spiritual dialogue, and a tangible representation of continuity. Participants' movements adapted to the fire's energy. Fast, sweeping gestures matched high flames, low, grounded motions corresponded with embers glowing near the hearth. Elders subtly adjusted tempo, amplitude, and orientation, ensuring that both individual expression and collective rhythm remained coherent. The circle's cohesion was reinforced by attentiveness to fire, shadows, and the dynamics of each other's motion. Every subtle adjustment maintained harmony while allowing space for improvisation, demonstrating that ritual is both structured and alive, dependent on responsiveness and presence. The natural environment further augmented the fire's influence. Breeze caused sparks to drift unpredictably, leaves to quiver, and smoke to swirl in ephemeral patterns. The river's distant murmur and nocturnal calls of wildlife added auditory depth, interacting with human sound and fire-generated rhythms. Shadows on surrounding rocks and trees created an immersive, three-dimensional canvas on which movement, flame, and imagination interwove. The audience witnesses a sensory ecosystem, a complex interplay of physical elements, human agency, and perception, all converging to create a ritual of profound resonance. Emotion and storytelling were inseparable from the fire's dance. Moments of pause emphasized reflection, moments of surge heightened exhilaration, and coordinated gestures told silent stories of hunting, struggle, triumph, and survival. Sparks punctuated climactic movements, while shadows emphasized subtle shifts in posture or attention. The choreography of flame and motion became a language, transmitting cultural memory and emotional nuance simultaneously. Observers, whether within the tribe or as an audience witnessing this unfolding, perceive that the fire is a storyteller, co-author of narrative, and amplifier of human expression. As the night progressed, the fire's energy intensified and then subsided in cyclical patterns. Participants instinctively adjusted, modulating motion, sound, and attention. Children learned to anticipate, adults to guide, and elders to observe, ensuring continuity, coherence, and emotional resonance. The fire, unpredictable yet responsive, maintained a dialogue with the tribe, shaping not only rhythm and choreography but collective awareness and social cohesion. In this way, ritual, survival, emotion, and memory became inseparable, all illuminated by the living, breathing fire at the center of the circle. By the end of this section, the audience understands that the fire is more than a practical tool, it is a dynamic participant, a symbol of continuity, and a mirror of emotion and intent. Its dance amplifies movement, shadow, sound, and ritual, transforming the night into a living story in which human presence, environmental phenomena, and ancestral memory converge. The fire's dance is a testament to the interconnectedness of life, the fragility of the present, and the enduring power of ritualized experience to bind community, knowledge, and spirit. The smoke rising from the fire curled and twisted, spiraling upward like a messenger carrying secrets into the night sky. Its movement was unpredictable yet graceful, forming shapes that the tribe interpreted with a combination of awe, reverence, and attentiveness. Elders watched intently, their eyes following the ephemeral trails, interpreting subtle changes in direction, density, and flow as signs, messages, or guidance from the unseen world. To the tribe, smoke was more than a byproduct of flame. It was a living, breathing language, a medium through which ancestors, spirits, and nature itself communicated with the present. Children, captivated by the ethereal ribbons, reached toward the drifting tendrils, their fingers tracing invisible patterns in the air. They mimicked the smoke's flow in their movements, bending, twirling, and swaying as if trying to merge with the intangible forms. Even in play, they absorbed lessons embedded in the ritual, observation, patience, and the delicate balance between action and reflection. Elders allowed this playful engagement, understanding that learning occurred as much through intuitive interaction with natural phenomena as through explicit instruction. The smoke became both teacher and mirror, revealing aspects of the world and the self that could not be captured in words alone. The scent of smoke permeated the clearing, adding a visceral layer to the sensory experience. Its warmth, pungency, and the subtle variations in aroma carried information: the type of wood burned, the intensity of the fire, or the direction of the wind. Participants instinctively adjusted to these cues, modulating movement, positioning, and breathing in harmony with the environment. The smoke's presence created both a physical and symbolic envelope, defining the ritual space while linking it to the broader natural world. Every inhalation, every glance through the haze, was a conscious engagement with the night's unfolding narrative. Shadows cast by smoke added another dimension to perception. The flames illuminated the swirling haze, producing shifting veils of darkness and light that danced across the faces, bodies, and surroundings of the tribe. These shadow patterns were read intuitively. A dense column suggested focus and intensity, a scattered drift invited gentleness or reflection. Movement within this shifting environment required heightened awareness, fostering attentiveness, responsiveness, and a sense of unity. Elders subtly guided participants to align gestures with smoke flows, creating a choreography that intertwined human motion, environmental phenomena, and ritual intent. The smoke also served as a symbolic bridge to the ancestors. Tendrils curling skyward were imagined as pathways for messages, prayers, or memories. Elders softly whispered invocations into the rising haze, their voices carrying through the night like subtle currents weaving between the flames and the stars. Participants responded with gestures, bows, or murmured echoes, reinforcing a dialogue that transcended time and space. Children, sensing the solemnity, slowed their movements, learning that communication with the unseen required attention, respect, and harmony. In this way, smoke became a tangible expression of spiritual connection, linking the living to those who had walked the same land long before. Patterns in the smoke were read as omens, teaching tools, or narrative devices. A spiral might signify continuity or eternity, a split column could symbolize choice, duality, or challenge, a sudden burst of sparks mingling with haze indicated transition or urgency. Participants internalized these visual cues, responding with gestures, chants, or shifts in position. Even without explicit instruction, the collective interpretation created shared understanding, reinforcing social cohesion, memory, and adaptive skill. The smoke functioned as both medium and message, its ephemeral forms conveying knowledge that was simultaneously practical, symbolic, and spiritual. Sound interacted subtly with the smoke's movement. The low hum of chanting, the soft stomp of rhythm, and the crackle of fire created acoustic currents that seemed to flow through the haze, guiding perception and attention. Elders used these cues to modulate pace, intensity, and focus, ensuring that the ritual remained cohesive and meaningful. Children, absorbing both visual and auditory signals, began to anticipate movements, gestures, and tonal shifts, further embedding knowledge and social awareness. The interplay of smoke, sound, and human motion produced a holistic environment in which sensory, emotional, and cognitive dimensions converged seamlessly. Emotion intensified in response to smoke. Its presence evoked awe, reflection, and subtle tension. Participants experienced a heightened sense of mortality, impermanence, and the interconnectedness of life. Moments of pause, when smoke obscured vision and softened sound, encouraged introspection and reverence. Conversely, bursts of flame piercing through haze elevated energy, excitement, and collective focus. The tribe learned to read, adapt, and respond to these fluctuations, internalizing lessons about attentiveness, resilience, and the fluidity of existence. Smoke became an emotional amplifier, a mirror reflecting the inner state of the community while shaping its outward expression. The environment beyond the fire interacted with the smoke in dynamic ways. Breeze carried tendrils into trees, over rocks, and toward the river, integrating the ritual space with the broader landscape. Sounds from nocturnal animals merged with drifting haze, creating an immersive ecosystem in which every element, fire, human, wind, and wildlife, was interdependent. Participants responded intuitively, adjusting movements and focus to maintain harmony and alignment. The smoke became a connective medium, linking ritual, environment, and human intention into a coherent, dynamic experience. By the end of the night, the whispers through smoke had left a lasting impression. Participants had internalized lessons of observation, patience, communication, and reverence, encoded not in words alone but in interaction with ephemeral forms. The audience can perceive that smoke functions simultaneously as teacher, messenger, and symbol, embodying impermanence, guidance, and continuity. Its dance above the fire, intertwined with light, shadow, and human movement, reinforces the night's themes: survival, memory, ritual, and the profound interconnection of life across generations. Beyond the immediate glow of the fire, the forest loomed in dense darkness, alive with unseen movements and subtle sounds. Every rustle of leaves, snap of a twig, and whisper of wind carried meaning. The tribe's eyes, trained over generations, had learned to pierce this obscurity, detecting even the faintest glimmers of movement or subtle shifts in shadow. In this darkness, vision was not simply a biological process, it was a cultivated skill, a dialogue between the observer and the environment, sharpened by necessity and sustained by centuries of experience. The children, though less practiced, were fascinated by the interplay of light and dark. They crouched close to the adults, peering into the shadows with wide, attentive eyes, absorbing the subtle cues that signaled the presence of animals, changes in terrain, or the approach of wind. Elders occasionally guided their gaze with a gentle hand or a whispered hint, teaching them not only to see but to interpret, to understand that the forest was not an empty space but a living ecosystem filled with both opportunity and risk. Observation became a lesson in patience, awareness, and humility, as each flicker of movement might carry profound significance. Predators and prey alike moved silently through the periphery, their eyes catching the faintest light and reflecting it like small, luminous orbs. The tribe understood these gleams as signs of life, indicators of caution, and guides for strategy. Every reflected flash of light held a story: a deer navigating the underbrush, a fox slipping between shadows, or an owl tracking sound through the night. The tribe's collective gaze wove these narratives together, connecting individual observations into a comprehensive map of the living, breathing forest. Through these shared perceptions, the darkness was not a void but a canvas of dynamic interaction, alive with intelligence, instinct, and intention. Movement in the dark was guided by more than sight. Subtle cues from sound, smell, and tactile feedback were integrated to form a complete awareness of surroundings. The crackle of the fire, the distant murmur of water, and the rustle of nocturnal creatures combined with reflections and shadows to provide a multisensory map of the forest. Elders led the tribe through this interplay, training attention and patience, modeling caution, responsiveness, and interpretive skill. Even in the absence of visible light, the tribe navigated with precision, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of environment and circumstance that transcended mere human biology. The darkness also heightened emotional awareness. Fear, anticipation, curiosity, and wonder coexisted in a delicate balance, amplified by the unknown. Adults maintained a measured presence, their calm reinforcing security and focus, while children oscillated between apprehension and fascination. Every sound, movement, and glimmer of reflected light provoked a nuanced response, requiring the tribe to regulate emotion, sustain attention, and act with coordinated intent. This heightened state of awareness reinforced social bonds, as each individual relied on others for guidance, confirmation, and reassurance. In this way, the darkness became both teacher and crucible, refining skill, instinct, and communal cohesion. The fire's glow provided intermittent guidance, casting shifting pools of light into the periphery. Shadows lengthened and contracted, revealing or concealing forms with each flicker. Participants adjusted subtly, leaning, squatting, or turning to align perception with illumination. Elders taught the younger members to anticipate these cycles, reading movement not only in the light but in the interplay between illumination and shadow. By doing so, the tribe developed an acute awareness of timing, spatial relationships, and environmental dynamics, enhancing both survival and ritualistic engagement. Eyes in the dark were also metaphoric. They represented attention, perception, and consciousness itself, extending beyond physical observation to encompass intuition, foresight, and emotional intelligence. The tribe learned that seeing was more than registering light, it was connecting knowledge, experience, and instinct to respond effectively to challenges. Observation became an active dialogue with the environment, a constant negotiation of presence and attention, survival and curiosity. Every glimmer of reflected eye, every subtle movement, was interpreted through layers of experience, memory, and anticipation. The nocturnal ecosystem contributed actively to this heightened awareness. Crickets, frogs, and distant predators produced rhythmic and unpredictable soundscapes that interwove with human perception. Rustling leaves, shifting shadows, and subtle air currents created dynamic patterns that participants integrated into their understanding of space and risk. The forest, alive with these signals, became a partner in the night's ritual, guiding movement, attention, and emotional modulation. The eyes in the dark were therefore not limited to the tribe alone, they included the myriad observers of the nocturnal world, each informing, responding, and interacting in a complex web of perception. Emotion intertwined with perception. The darkness elicited a combination of wonder, caution, and reverence, reinforcing attention to detail and social cohesion. Laughter, murmurs, and whispered instructions punctuated moments of tension, creating rhythms that synchronized both emotional and physical response. The tribe experienced the forest as a living stage, where every glance, movement, and sound contributed to the narrative of the night. Darkness became a medium through which knowledge, instinct, and emotion were transmitted and refined. By the end of this section, the audience perceives that the eyes in the dark are not merely human, they are a collective consciousness spanning generations, senses, and species. Observation, perception, and attention are interwoven with ritual, survival, and emotion, demonstrating that darkness, far from being empty, is a space of profound awareness, learning, and interconnection. Through these eyes, the tribe navigates the unknown, reading subtle signs, interpreting signals, and maintaining cohesion, embodying both human adaptability and reverence for the unseen world. A soft wind swept through the clearing, carrying with it the subtle scent of the forest, the smoke of the fire, and the faint traces of distant rivers and earth. To the tribe, this wind was not mere air, it was the breath of those who had walked these lands before them. Every inhalation seemed to connect them to generations past, a tangible reminder that life and knowledge were a continuum rather than an isolated moment. Elders spoke softly to the wind, whispering invocations, names of ancestors, or fragments of stories long remembered. The living inhaled these words, exhaling intention, reverence, and memory into the night. The children, less attuned to the layers of symbolic meaning, felt the wind as a presence, an invisible hand guiding their awareness. They paused in movement, letting the currents carry their hair, clothes, and gestures, experiencing the sensation of being gently enveloped by something larger than themselves. This sensation was both physical and spiritual, teaching them that presence required attentiveness, that awareness of unseen forces was as critical as mastery over visible ones. Elders observed silently, letting these intuitive lessons unfold naturally, knowing that understanding could emerge through embodied experience as much as instruction. Firelight and wind intertwined, creating visual poetry. Sparks rose into the currents, dancing unpredictably before fading into darkness. Shadows stretched and shifted as flames bent and flickered, producing ephemeral forms that seemed to echo ancestral faces, figures, or animals. Each movement of light and smoke was interpreted not as random but as part of a continuum of guidance, storytelling, and reflection. The tribe's movements adapted to these patterns. Gestures were elongated to match rising sparks, postures were grounded to mirror drifting smoke, and eyes followed ephemeral forms that hinted at meaning. The fire and wind became co-creators of narrative, shaping human action while reflecting collective memory. Ritual gestures grew more deliberate in response to these currents. Hands lifted, arms extended, and bodies arched in alignment with the smoke and wind, translating invisible movements into tangible motion. Elders guided these adjustments subtly, maintaining balance and rhythm while allowing expressive variation. Children mirrored these gestures, blending intuition with learned behavior, discovering that the world itself could instruct and that their actions could resonate with forces beyond sight. Breath, movement, and observation intertwined, creating a holistic awareness in which the ancestors' presence was palpable, immediate, and inseparable from lived reality. The wind also carried sound, integrating distant echoes into the ritual. Murmurs of water, rustle of leaves, and calls of nocturnal creatures mingled with human chants, footsteps, and whispered invocations. The tribe's ears, like their eyes, learned to parse meaning from these sounds. The direction of wind might signal approaching rain, the rustle of foliage might indicate an animal's path, and the distant call of a bird might mark temporal or spatial patterns. This multisensory attentiveness reinforced survival skills, deepened ritual engagement, and created a shared understanding that extended beyond the visible circle into the surrounding environment. Emotion surged in synchrony with ancestral presence. The tribe experienced awe, reverence, and subtle tension, amplified by the sensation of invisible witnesses. Adults moved with deliberate grace, grounding children in safety while expressing respect. Elders' movements and whispers reinforced the continuity of knowledge, and the youngest members felt the magnitude of the unseen, internalizing lessons about humility, connection, and responsibility. The wind, fire, and shadow became collaborators in this emotional landscape, amplifying joy, solemnity, and collective focus, creating a shared affective field that bound the group together. The symbolic power of breath was central. Every inhalation represented receptivity, a connection to history, environment, and spirit. Every exhalation signified contribution, transmission of presence, memory, and intent. In ritual movement, gestures synchronized with breath, creating a rhythm that reinforced both bodily awareness and spiritual connection. This interplay of inhalation and exhalation, of reception and expression, mirrored the cycle of life itself: arrival and departure, presence and absence, continuity and transformation. Children gradually internalized these rhythms, learning that breath could be a guide, an anchor, and a medium for understanding forces beyond immediate perception. The fire's energy harmonized with the wind and breath, producing dynamic interplay. Flames bent, sparks leapt, and smoke twisted, aligning unpredictably with human gesture. Participants adjusted continuously, modulating pace, amplitude, and orientation in response to these environmental cues. Elders' subtle guidance ensured that cohesion was maintained, but improvisation was encouraged, reflecting the duality of ritual, structure and spontaneity coexisting in balance. The tribe's awareness extended beyond themselves, encompassing fire, wind, smoke, and shadow, integrating environmental feedback into human motion and cognition. Memory and narrative were encoded in the breath of the ancestors. Elders whispered stories into the currents, gestures mirrored mythic or historic episodes, and movements replicated hunting strategies, survival lessons, or moral guidance. Each breath, motion, and sound became a thread in a complex tapestry, linking past generations with present practice and future learning. Children learned that ritual was not static, it was alive, adaptive, and participatory. The night's choreography was both a reenactment and an innovation, a living archive of communal wisdom and cultural continuity. By the culmination of this section, the audience senses that the ancestors' presence is tangible, woven into air, fire, and shadow. Breath becomes a conduit between worlds, linking living participants to history, environment, and spirit. The tribe's engagement demonstrates that awareness, movement, and ritual are inseparable, and that survival is as much about attentiveness, reverence, and connection as it is about action. The breath of the ancestors envelopes the night, shaping perception, deepening emotion, and reinforcing continuity across generations, leaving a lingering sense of both awe and intimacy. The night's stillness was punctuated by the tribe's collective heartbeat, a rhythm that pulsed through the circle like a living drum. Feet shifted in unison, chests rose and fell, and subtle tremors traveled through the ground, connecting each participant to the other in ways that were both physical and symbolic. The shadows cast by the fire mirrored these rhythms, stretching, contracting, and merging across faces, bodies, and the surrounding forest floor. Each shadow was an echo of motion, an extension of heartbeat, and a reflection of the tribe's collective presence, transforming the clearing into a stage alive with life and memory. Children observed this phenomenon with wide-eyed fascination, their small chests rising and falling in imitation, their movements slightly lagging behind those of adults. Elders watched them closely, recognizing the importance of these early lessons in rhythm, timing, and awareness. The shadows served as visual feedback, reinforcing coordination and attentiveness. Even the youngest participants began to understand that movement, heartbeat, and shadow were interconnected, forming a dynamic system in which each element amplified and responded to the others. Through these subtle interactions, children internalized not only physical skills but the social and emotional cohesion necessary for both survival and ritual. The adults maintained a careful modulation of pace and intensity. Each step, sway, and gesture was calibrated to sustain the rhythm of the group while responding to the flickering firelight. Heartbeats were felt as well as observed, transmitted through proximity, touch, and subtle vibrations in the clearing. Elders monitored these oscillations, ensuring that momentum neither lagged nor accelerated beyond the circle's capacity. This attention to internal rhythm reinforced the symbiosis between individual control and collective harmony, illustrating that survival, ritual, and social cohesion were inextricably linked. Shadows shifted in response to both movement and light, creating a visual symphony that accentuated rhythm and presence. Long, stretching silhouettes emphasized expansive gestures, while compressed, merging shadows highlighted intimate alignment and closeness. Participants became aware of how their own movements influenced collective perception, learning that the visual imprint of action was as meaningful as the action itself. This realization fostered attentiveness, humility, and respect. Each motion contributed to a living tapestry, in which the health of the whole depended on the awareness and care of every individual. The forest beyond the fire added depth to the interplay of heartbeat and shadow. The wind rustled through trees, carrying leaves and branches that cast subtle patterns across the clearing. Distant animal calls interwove with the tribe's collective rhythm, reinforcing attentiveness and sensitivity to the environment. Elders subtly guided the group to integrate these external cues, encouraging participants to harmonize with both the natural world and the constructed rhythm of ritual. In this way, the dance of heartbeat and shadow extended beyond the circle, linking human presence to the surrounding ecosystem in an immersive, holistic experience. Emotion was amplified by these synchronizations. Collective heartbeat fostered a tangible sense of unity, while shadows accentuated both intimacy and drama. Joy, reverence, anticipation, and solemnity were felt not only individually but communally, resonating through the group and amplifying awareness. Children instinctively mirrored these emotional states, their own heartbeats accelerating or calming in response to the group. The interplay of physiological response and shared perception created an emotional resonance that bound participants, intensifying engagement and reinforcing the significance of ritual as a medium of collective memory and emotional education. Light, shadow, and movement interacted to create storytelling through presence. Elders emphasized gestures that aligned with flickering firelight, allowing shadows to convey narrative arcs, hunting strategies, mythic events, or ancestral lessons. Emotion deepened in this final phase of the night. Awe, reverence, and melancholy intertwined, amplified by the quiet of the forest and the residual warmth of fire. Participants felt both the intimacy of shared presence and the vastness of ancestral and environmental context. Children mirrored these feelings, oscillating between wonder, solemnity, and quiet reflection. Elders demonstrated emotional regulation through subtle posture, gaze, and breath, modeling how to carry grief, joy, and awareness with balance and composure. The embers amplified emotion, creating a resonant space where individual and collective feeling merged, leaving a lasting impression of depth, connectivity, and significance. Sound remained a subtle yet powerful component. The soft crackle of remaining embers, rustling leaves, distant water, and nocturnal life all contributed to a complex auditory landscape. Participants adjusted breathing, posture, and attention in response, creating a living dialogue with the environment. Children internalized the lesson that memory, perception, and awareness were inseparable from context, that the world itself participates in ritual, reflection, and continuity. The embers became a locus of sensory integration, where sight, sound, touch, and emotional resonance converged, reinforcing lessons of attentiveness, connection, and memory. Symbolism permeated the final moments. Each ember represented both a single life and a collective history, a fragment of experience within a broader continuum. Elders emphasized that memory is not passive but active, it must be observed, embodied, and carried forward. Children began to grasp that their own presence, attention, and actions were integral to this ongoing legacy. The ember's fleeting brilliance became a metaphor for impermanence, continuity, and the responsibility of the living to honor, transmit, and integrate lessons from the past into present action. The forest itself seemed to respond to the ritual's quiet intensity. Wind shifted subtly, carrying the scent of earth, leaves, and distant water. Nighttime creatures moved softly, contributing layers of sound, motion, and presence. Elders guided the tribe to maintain awareness, integrating environmental cues into perception and reflection. Children discovered that memory is not isolated within human experience, it interacts with landscape, flora, fauna, and the subtle rhythms of nature. The embers, fading but persistent, symbolized the interconnectedness of human life, environmental context, and ancestral presence. Children learned to read these cues intuitively, linking physical motion with symbolic meaning. The act of moving, breathing, and observing became a lesson in rhythm, coordination, and interpretation. Heartbeat and shadow became co-authors of memory, inscribing knowledge into bodies, eyes, and collective experience. The subtle tremor of the ground beneath the circle added another layer of connectivity. Footfalls and shifts transmitted vibrations that were both felt and perceived visually through shadow interplay. Participants adjusted to these microcurrents, maintaining cohesion while responding to emergent feedback from the collective body. The audience can sense that the night's ritual was more than visual or auditory, it was an immersive, somatic experience in which touch, movement, perception, and awareness converged. The tribe operated as a single, sentient organism, responsive to internal and external cues in a continuous loop of feedback and adaptation. Every participant's awareness was heightened by this interplay. Eyes followed shadows, ears tuned to subtle variations in heartbeat and movement, and bodies adjusted to maintain harmony. Elders guided without intrusion, modeling attentiveness, emotional regulation, and embodied knowledge. Children absorbed these lessons, learning that perception, action, and reflection were inseparable, and that mastery over oneself and awareness of others were essential for both survival and communal cohesion. Heartbeat and shadow became living teachers, providing instruction through sensation, observation, and participation. By the end of this section, the audience perceives the profound interconnection between body, light, and environment. Heartbeats synchronize, shadows stretch and merge, and collective awareness binds the group into a living organism. The night's ritual demonstrates that survival, social cohesion, and cultural continuity are inseparable from attentiveness, perception, and emotional resonance. Heartbeats and shadows become a tangible manifestation of collective life, memory, and identity, illustrating the depth of human connection and the power of ritual to bind past, present, and future. The soft thud of feet against earth reverberated across the clearing, creating a rhythm that seemed both ancient and immediate. Each footfall was amplified by proximity, soil texture, and the subtle incline of the terrain, sending vibrations through the ground that were felt as well as heard. Elders guided these movements with meticulous attention, ensuring that rhythm, spacing, and timing reinforced collective cohesion. Children imitated carefully, learning that survival, ritual, and awareness depended not only on observation but on attunement to both sound and sensation. Footsteps became more than locomotion, they were a form of communication, a medium through which attention, intent, and unity were expressed. The forest beyond the clearing absorbed and refracted these sounds, creating echoes that intertwined with natural nocturnal rhythms. Distant calls of owls, rustling leaves, and the murmurs of water merged with the tribe's footsteps to form a layered acoustic tapestry. Participants learned to parse these overlapping signals, distinguishing between environmental cues and internal rhythm. Elders used these echoes as a teaching tool, subtly adjusting pace or pattern to demonstrate the interplay of attention, perception, and response. Children's wide eyes reflected wonder as they discovered that movement was inseparable from context. Every step resonated beyond the immediate circle, influencing perception and experience. Footsteps became a bridge between past and present. Elders reminded the tribe that the paths they traced were the same routes their ancestors had walked countless times. Each echo carried the weight of history, a reminder that survival, learning, and ritual were cumulative, passed down through generations. Children were taught to honor these echoes, listening not just to sound but to the layers of meaning embedded in rhythm, direction, and impact. The forest itself seemed to participate, responding to movement, carrying memory, and amplifying the resonance of human presence across space and time. Shadows shifted in response to motion, elongating and contracting as feet struck the earth. The firelight danced across these silhouettes, creating a visual reflection of rhythm. Each movement produced a subtle, synchronized choreography, a partnership between body, shadow, and flame. Elders guided the tribe to remain aware of these patterns, encouraging a deep sense of attentiveness and alignment. Children learned that each gesture, each step, could influence collective perception and emotional tone, reinforcing lessons of coordination, focus, and communal harmony. Footsteps were thus both functional and expressive, a medium through which movement, attention, and story converged. Emotion intensified through these resonances. The repetition of movement created meditative states, while sudden shifts in tempo produced exhilaration, anticipation, or reflection. The tribe's synchronized steps fostered intimacy and trust, a shared rhythm that bound participants together. Children mirrored these emotional currents, their responses subtle yet telling, a quickened pace in excitement, a careful pause in reverence. The collective experience of rhythm, echo, and shadow cultivated awareness, empathy, and cohesion, demonstrating that human connection is as much somatic and sensory as it is cognitive or social. The tactile dimension of footsteps was equally significant. The tribe's feet made contact with earth, leaves, and stones, transmitting subtle vibrations and providing feedback about terrain, stability, and force. Participants adjusted instinctively, modifying pressure, stance, and alignment to maintain balance and rhythm. Elders guided these adaptations, modeling responsiveness and subtlety, ensuring that movement reinforced both safety and cohesion. Children absorbed these lessons, learning that attention to detail, bodily awareness, and environmental sensitivity were critical for survival and ritual. The ground became a partner in the night's performance, a medium through which rhythm, story, and experience flowed. Footsteps also carried symbolic meaning. The direction, pace, and intensity reflected intention, hierarchy, and emotional state. Elders' deliberate movement signaled guidance and control, adults' measured steps maintained continuity, children's tentative motions reflected curiosity and learning. The echoes amplified these signals, transmitting information across space and time. Participants attuned to these nuances, learning to interpret and respond to subtle cues. Footsteps became a language, conveying guidance, cohesion, and emotional resonance, a medium through which knowledge, presence, and social dynamics were communicated non-verbally. The environment actively shaped perception of movement. Breeze, terrain, and distant water sounds interacted with footsteps, influencing both sound and sensation. Elders guided participants to integrate these factors, reinforcing attentiveness to context and adaptation to external conditions. Children discovered that perception extended beyond immediate senses, encompassing interplay between self, environment, and others. Each footfall became an opportunity for learning, an interaction between body, mind, and surroundings, demonstrating that survival and ritual were inseparable from embodied awareness. Emotion and memory intertwined with movement. Footsteps recalled hunting journeys, tribal migrations, and ritualized dances of previous generations. Each echo was both literal and metaphorical, carrying traces of stories, lessons, and ancestral presence. Children learned to internalize these rhythms, linking physical sensation with cultural memory and emotional resonance. The night's echoes created continuity, embedding knowledge and experience within bodies as well as minds. The audience senses that every step is intentional, every vibration meaningful, and that the ritualized movement of the tribe preserves both history and identity. By the end of this section, the audience perceives that footsteps are more than motion, they are carriers of memory, rhythm, and social cohesion. The tribe's synchronized movement demonstrates that perception, attention, and emotional resonance are inseparable from survival, ritual, and communal life. Echoes of footsteps transform the clearing into a living archive, where movement communicates knowledge, presence, and connection across generations. Footsteps, sound, shadow, and rhythm converge into an immersive experience of shared history, awareness, and belonging, leaving both participants and observers profoundly attuned to the interdependence of body, environment, and community. The night beyond the fire was alive with subtle sounds, a symphony of whispers carried by wind, leaves, and water. Each rustle, drip, or distant call was a note in an intricate composition that the tribe listened to with acute attentiveness. These murmurs were not merely background noise, they were guides, warnings, and companions, shaping movement, emotion, and focus. Elders taught the young to discern meaning in these layered sounds, to distinguish predator from prey, wind from water, and subtle environmental shifts that could signal danger or opportunity. The forest spoke, and the tribe learned to respond with careful observation, intuition, and reverence. The children, wide-eyed and alert, noticed patterns that adults sometimes overlooked. The rhythm of falling leaves, the gentle tapping of branches, or the low hum of insects formed a continuous, dynamic backdrop that engaged both mind and body. Elders encouraged attentive observation, explaining that the forest's voice was a source of knowledge and a reflection of interconnected life. In these subtle murmurs, the tribe found instruction and reassurance, learning to move with the rhythms of the natural world, integrating sound into their awareness and decision-making. The firelight illuminated the forest edges intermittently, revealing shapes that merged with the murmurs. Shadows shifted in tandem with sound, creating illusions of movement, heightening alertness and focus. A branch scraping against another could be mistaken for an approaching animal, a sudden rustle might signal curiosity, caution, or the presence of a nocturnal predator. The tribe's senses became finely tuned instruments, integrating auditory, visual, and tactile inputs into a cohesive understanding of space. Each movement, pause, or gesture reflected an interpretation of these cues, demonstrating the inseparable link between perception, action, and environment. Elders modeled careful attention, listening and observing while guiding children to interpret what they heard. Subtle adjustments in posture, direction, and movement aligned with natural sounds, ensuring safety and rhythm within the circle. The forest's murmurs became both teacher and medium, transmitting lessons that could not be expressed fully in words. Children learned the importance of patience, discernment, and adaptability, internalizing these skills as part of their physical, emotional, and social development. Sound became a language in itself, conveying both immediate information and cultural continuity. Emotion was heightened by these environmental cues. The hum of insects and rustling leaves evoked a sense of presence, wonder, and interconnectedness. Occasional louder sounds, a falling branch, a distant call, introduced tension, anticipation, or excitement. The tribe's heartbeat, movements, and vocalizations adjusted in response, synchronizing with the forest's rhythms. Children mirrored these emotional fluctuations, learning not only to interpret the environment but to regulate their own responses. The murmurs of the forest thus served as both teacher and amplifier, deepening awareness and emotional resonance. Spatial awareness expanded as sounds carried through the forest. Participants adjusted orientation, posture, and pace according to auditory cues, creating a dynamic choreography of movement and perception. The interplay between distance, echo, and direction required attentiveness, encouraging the tribe to cultivate both individual skill and collective coordination. Children learned that sound was a map, a guide to environmental awareness, and a medium of interaction. The forest became an active participant in the ritual, shaping experience, decision-making, and social cohesion simultaneously. The murmurs also carried symbolic meaning. Elders interpreted subtle shifts in rhythm or volume as signs of ancestral presence, omens, or messages from the natural world. Soft rustles might indicate blessings or approval, while sudden interruptions could signal caution or the need for attention. Participants responded intuitively, aligning gestures, posture, and voice with these cues. Children internalized this interpretive skill, learning that attentiveness and sensitivity were essential not only for survival but for cultural continuity and spiritual awareness. Sound became a medium for history, memory, and guidance, connecting present experience to ancestral wisdom. Footsteps and movement interacted with environmental sound. The tribe's motion contributed to the auditory landscape, creating echoes, vibrations, and rhythms that blended with the murmurs. Elders guided participants to modulate pace and weight, ensuring harmony between human presence and forest resonance. Children learned the subtle power of their own actions, discovering that awareness and intentionality could influence both social and environmental dynamics. Sound and movement became co-creators of experience, a feedback loop that reinforced attention, cohesion, and emotional depth. The nocturnal ecosystem actively participated in this dynamic. The chirping of insects, the distant croak of frogs, and the gentle murmur of water shaped temporal awareness, providing cues for ritual timing, movement, and reflection. Birds or mammals moving unseen created unpredictability, encouraging flexibility and adaptive response. The tribe's heightened sensitivity to these cues reinforced survival skills while deepening their connection to the environment. Children observed this interplay and began to intuit the principles of cause and effect, anticipation, and mutual dependence embedded in ecological systems. By the end of the night, the murmurs of the forest had become an integral part of the ritual. The tribe had internalized lessons of attentiveness, responsiveness, and emotional awareness. The audience perceives that these sounds are not mere ambience, they are a medium of knowledge, continuity, and connection. Every rustle, drip, and hum contributes to learning, coordination, and communal identity, demonstrating that survival, ritual, and awareness are inseparable from the attentive engagement with the environment. The forest, through its whispers, becomes both teacher and witness, enriching the night with layered meaning, presence, and resonance. The fire at the center of the circle threw its light in unpredictable patterns, illuminating faces with warmth, shadow, and fleeting clarity. Each flicker revealed a new contour, a subtle expression, or a hidden glance. The tribe's eyes, accustomed to the nuances of dim light, noticed every shift, the tightening of a jaw, the widening of a child's eyes, or the subtle curve of an elder's smile. In this interplay of flame and face, intimacy and awareness were heightened, creating a dynamic, living portrait of the community. Faces became mirrors of emotion, intention, and focus, amplified by the fire's oscillating glow. Children watched the interplay with fascination, captivated by the way shadows elongated and contracted over familiar features. They began to mimic gestures, testing expressions in the reflections of nearby surfaces or in the firelight on their own skin. Elders observed these attempts, subtly guiding them with quiet nods, soft touches, or whispered encouragements. In these interactions, learning occurred organically. The children absorbed lessons of empathy, attention, and emotional literacy without formal instruction. The fire became both a teacher and a canvas, rendering human presence visible and legible, while cultivating awareness of subtlety, rhythm, and relational dynamics. The fire's color and intensity shifted as it consumed wood, producing gradients from deep reds to vibrant oranges and fleeting hints of blue at the tips of flames. These variations accentuated different facial expressions. Warm hues highlighted smiles and eyes, while darker areas emphasized solemnity or reflection. The tribe responded intuitively, adjusting gestures and posture to harmonize with the visual and emotional landscape. Children learned that observation extended beyond recognition of shapes. It was an interpretive skill, a sensitivity to light, context, and affective nuance. Faces and flames together communicated emotion, intention, and social cohesion, forming a visual language that required attentiveness and empathy. Movement around the fire intertwined with these visual dynamics. Gestures, shifts in stance, and subtle motions altered the way light and shadow fell on faces, producing ever-changing visual narratives. Elders guided rhythm and spacing, ensuring that each participant's presence contributed to the collective tableau. Children mirrored these interactions, learning that personal movement influenced communal perception, and that awareness of others was as critical as control of self. The circle became a living portrait, where fire, face, and gesture collaborated in a continuously evolving display of human expression and collective awareness. Emotion intensified under the shifting flames. Joy, wonder, reverence, and tension were amplified as participants read one another's faces in concert with light. Children felt these currents strongly, learning to modulate both reaction and attention, internalizing lessons of empathy, restraint, and responsiveness. Elders used these moments to reinforce social and emotional norms subtly, guiding the tribe in ways that emphasized harmony, respect, and interdependence. Faces illuminated by fire became both mirrors and instruments, reflecting and shaping emotion, creating a shared affective landscape that bound the community together. The firelight also revealed subtle micro-expressions, small twitches, fleeting glances, or barely perceptible shifts in posture, that carried social and emotional information. Elders encouraged participants to notice these cues, fostering heightened perception, anticipation, and responsiveness. Children gradually absorbed these skills, learning that effective communication relied on both observation and interpretation. Faces became a repository of information, conveying intent, alignment, and internal states. The fire's illumination transformed ordinary gestures into meaningful signals, emphasizing that visibility and perception were integral to survival, coordination, and cultural practice. Shadows cast by the fire added another dimension to perception. Features elongated, merged, or fragmented, creating a dynamic visual language that was both literal and symbolic. The tribe learned to navigate this interplay, adjusting gestures, posture, and expression to communicate effectively within the circle. Children discovered that interpretation required attention to detail, timing, and context, integrating visual cues with emotional understanding. Shadows amplified meaning, producing a layered narrative of presence, intention, and shared experience that extended beyond the immediate circle into the surrounding night. Emotion deepened in this final phase of the night. Awe, reverence, and melancholy intertwined, amplified by the quiet of the forest and the residual warmth of fire. Participants felt both the intimacy of shared presence and the vastness of ancestral and environmental context. Children mirrored these feelings, oscillating between wonder, solemnity, and quiet reflection. Elders demonstrated emotional regulation through subtle posture, gaze, and breath, modeling how to carry grief, joy, and awareness with balance and composure. The embers amplified emotion, creating a resonant space where individual and collective feeling merged, leaving a lasting impression of depth, connectivity, and significance. Sound remained a subtle yet powerful component. The soft crackle of remaining embers, rustling leaves, distant water, and nocturnal life all contributed to a complex auditory landscape. Participants adjusted breathing, posture, and attention in response, creating a living dialogue with the environment. Children internalized the lesson that memory, perception, and awareness were inseparable from context, that the world itself participates in ritual, reflection, and continuity. The embers became a locus of sensory integration, where sight, sound, touch, and emotional resonance converged, reinforcing lessons of attentiveness, connection, and memory. Symbolism permeated the final moments. Each ember represented both a single life and a collective history, a fragment of experience within a broader continuum. Elders emphasized that memory is not passive but active, it must be observed, embodied, and carried forward. Children began to grasp that their own presence, attention, and actions were integral to this ongoing legacy. The embers' fleeting brilliance became a metaphor for impermanence, continuity, and the responsibility of the living to honor, transmit, and integrate lessons from the past into present action. The forest itself seemed to respond to the ritual's quiet intensity. Wind shifted subtly, carrying the scent of earth, leaves, and distant water. Nighttime creatures moved softly, contributing layers of sound, motion, and presence. Elders guided the tribe to maintain awareness, integrating environmental cues into perception and reflection. Children discovered that memory is not isolated within human experience, it interacts with landscape, flora, fauna, and the subtle rhythms of nature. The embers, fading but persistent, symbolized the interconnectedness of human life, environmental context, and ancestral presence. The interplay of flame, face, and gesture also reinforced cultural continuity. Elders' expressions carried lessons, stories, and subtle guidance embedded in micro-movement and gaze. Children mirrored these cues, encoding knowledge in action and awareness rather than words alone. The ritual transformed each face into a living archive, storing memory, social norms, and ancestral wisdom. Firelight highlighted these transmissions, rendering ephemeral expressions visible and legible, while shadows emphasized relational dynamics, attention, and collective rhythm. Faces and flames thus became instruments of education, memory, and social cohesion. Environmental sounds accentuated visual perception. The crackle of fire, the murmur of wind, and distant nocturnal calls created a sensory backdrop that influenced attention, posture, and expression. Participants responded in subtle synchrony, modulating gestures and facial expressions to maintain alignment with both internal rhythm and external cues. Children observed these interactions, learning that awareness extended beyond visual perception to include auditory and somatic integration. Flame and face became part of a larger sensory ecology, a living interplay of observation, emotion, and presence. By the end of the night, the audience perceives that flames and faces are inseparable in the ritual's immersive experience. Fire illuminates not only physical features but emotional currents, relational dynamics, and cultural continuity. The tribe's attentiveness to facial expression, gesture, and shadow illustrates the depth of human connection, empathy, and awareness. Flames and faces become co-creators of meaning, memory, and social cohesion, leaving a lasting impression of intimacy, presence, and interdependence that resonates far beyond the fire's light. A profound stillness fell over the clearing, a momentary pause in the rhythm of fire, footsteps, and murmurs. The tribe held its collective breath, not out of fear but in recognition of something greater than themselves, an unspoken agreement, a pact formed in silence between human presence, environment, and the ancestral forces that watched unseen. In this quiet, every subtle movement, glance, and gesture carried weight. Children sensed the gravity without fully understanding it, pausing mid-step, eyes wide and attentive, absorbing the atmosphere of reverence and collective acknowledgement. The silent pact was as much about observation as participation. Elders watched each individual closely, noting alignment of gaze, posture, and breathing. The agreement was not verbalized, but its terms were clear: attentiveness, respect, and presence were mandatory. Those who failed to honor it were gently corrected through subtle gesture or positioning, teaching that the tribe's cohesion depended on shared understanding and mutual vigilance. Children, sensitive to these nuances, quickly internalized the rhythms, learning that silence could be as communicative as speech, and that connection and accountability extended beyond spoken instruction. The fire burned steadily, its glow subdued yet persistent, reinforcing the sacredness of the pact. Shadows merged into soft darkness, isolating the circle from the surrounding forest while simultaneously connecting the tribe to the wider environment. Every flicker, every shift in light, mirrored the tension and commitment of the participants. The silent pact was not a passive state, it required active engagement, heightened awareness, and alignment of mind and body. Children felt the subtle pressure of participation, learning that true inclusion demanded presence, observation, and responsiveness. Environmental cues intensified the awareness of the pact. The rustle of leaves, distant water murmurs, and nocturnal animal calls were all integrated into perception, forming a subtle, continuous dialogue. Elders guided interpretation through gestures, breath, and eye contact, ensuring that the tribe's attention remained fluid yet focused. Children discovered that listening was active, involving discernment, memory, and anticipatory response. The silent pact extended beyond social interaction, it encompassed interaction with the forest itself, reinforcing interdependence between human and environment. Emotion was amplified through this deliberate quiet. Anticipation, reverence, and a subtle tension intertwined with collective heartbeat and respiration. Participants became acutely aware of one another, sensing the presence and intent of each individual. Children mirrored these emotional currents, their attention oscillating between awe, curiosity, and cautious respect. Elders modeled emotional regulation, demonstrating that silence could heighten perception, strengthen connection, and amplify meaning. The pact was thus both relational and experiential, reinforcing communal bonds while cultivating emotional literacy. Movement, when it occurred, was measured and deliberate. Shifts in position, gestures, and even micro-movements were synchronized with the rhythms of breath, heartbeat, and environmental cues. Elders guided these actions subtly, maintaining cohesion while allowing natural expression. Children learned that movement could communicate intention, alignment, and respect, and that silence magnified both perception and impact. Every gesture became amplified in significance, reinforcing the gravity of participation and the interdependence of all members within the ritual space. The pact also carried symbolic resonance. It represented the unbroken link between past and present, a continuation of traditions and knowledge passed through generations. Elders invoked ancestral presence not with words but through posture, gaze, and subtle action, ensuring that children felt the weight of continuity. Every inhalation and exhalation within the circle became a marker of reverence and inclusion, a reflection of the tribe's collective commitment to honor the land, the ancestors, and one another. The silent pact encoded cultural memory, reinforcing values, survival lessons, and relational awareness without explicit instruction. Subtle sensory integration heightened the experience. Firelight, shadow, and sound coalesced to create a multi-layered environment of perception. Participants attuned their vision to flickering shapes, their ears to whispers of the forest, and their bodies to vibrations in the earth. Elders demonstrated the seamless connection between these sensory inputs, modeling responsiveness, observation, and interpretation. Children absorbed these lessons through embodied practice, internalizing that awareness was holistic, encompassing both external phenomena and internal states. The pact required participation in this sensory ecosystem, teaching attentiveness, adaptability, and presence. The communal nature of the pact reinforced trust and cohesion. Silence necessitated reliance on subtle cues, shared rhythms, and implicit communication. Participants learned to anticipate gestures, recognize intent, and synchronize action without spoken word. Children discovered the power of observation and subtlety, understanding that social harmony depended on attentiveness and mutual respect. The silent pact fostered collective responsibility, emphasizing that the integrity of the group relied on the mindfulness of each member. By the conclusion of the section, the audience perceives the silent pact as a multidimensional phenomenon, a ritual of attentiveness, a demonstration of social cohesion, and a conduit for ancestral and environmental connection. Silence becomes active and potent, amplifying emotion, perception, and relational awareness. Footsteps, breath, gaze, and gesture are all components of this living agreement, which binds the tribe together, integrates them with their surroundings, and transmits lessons across generations. The pact leaves an enduring impression of unity, reverence, and the subtle power of nonverbal communication, illustrating that profound connection does not always require words but thrives in shared presence, observation, and intentionality. The night air thickened with quiet anticipation as the tribe settled into their final formation around the fire. The flames, now steady and golden, reflected off faces marked by generations of experience and eyes wide with a mixture of reverence, wonder, and sorrow. Every movement was deliberate, every gaze measured, as if the circle itself had become a sacred instrument, vibrating with the energy of shared history and collective memory. The last circle was not merely a gathering, it was a culmination, a final act of communion that bound the living to ancestors, the present to the past, and the tribe to the environment that had sustained them for countless seasons. Children, less burdened by the weight of memory but acutely aware of the mood, mirrored the adults' movements and postures. Their small bodies shifted in alignment, hands raised, knees bent, or heads bowed in imitation. Elders allowed these mimetic actions, understanding that participation in ritual was as much about observation and embodiment as about knowledge or instruction. In the silence between movements, the youngest members could feel the gravity of continuity, sensing without words that this circle represented the sum of countless nights, countless lessons, and countless ancestors who had walked the same grounds, breathed the same air, and learned the same rhythms of survival and cohesion. The firelight played across the clearing with a rhythm of its own. Shadows lengthened, merged, and fractured repeatedly, creating an ephemeral choreography that enhanced the ritual's depth. Faces alternated between clarity and obscurity, allowing each participant's expression to momentarily dominate the tableau before dissolving into collective ambiguity. Elders guided this interplay subtly, ensuring that each member's presence contributed to the overall harmony of the circle. Children observed how light and shadow communicated emotion, hierarchy, and attention, internalizing lessons that were at once practical and symbolic. The world could be read in subtle variations, and one's actions and presence mattered to the whole. Movement within the last circle was both structured and fluid. Gestures, steps, and postures followed a rhythm informed by fire, wind, heartbeat, and the quiet murmurs of the forest. Elders maintained a careful balance between discipline and freedom, guiding without constraining, allowing improvisation while reinforcing cohesion. Children experienced the dynamic tension between individuality and collective flow, learning that participation required attentiveness, adaptability, and respect for others' presence. The circle became a living organism, each member a node in a network of perception, movement, and emotion. The ambient sounds of the night deepened the sensory experience. Rustling leaves, distant water, nocturnal calls, and the crackle of the fire wove together into a complex soundscape. Participants adjusted gestures, posture, and breathing in response to these cues, creating a multi-layered dialogue between human and environment. Children learn to integrate auditory perception with visual and somatic awareness, discovering that engagement with the world required attentiveness to multiple streams of information simultaneously. The last circle was thus not merely a visual or tactile experience but an immersive, multisensory communion that refined perception, attention, and emotional resonance. Emotion surged through the group in waves. Reverence, sorrow, anticipation, and awe intermingled as participants synchronized with one another and with the environment. Elders modulated their own expressions and movements to guide this emotional rhythm, subtly reinforcing social cohesion, empathy, and attentional focus. Children, sensitive to these currents, learn to read and respond to complex emotional landscapes, understanding that survival and social cohesion depended on alignment of mind, body, and heart. The circle became a vessel for emotion as much as for ritual, an ephemeral medium through which collective experience was encoded and transmitted. The symbolic resonance of the last circle was profound. Each gesture, glance, and breath was a thread in a web of ancestral memory, survival knowledge, and cultural continuity. Elders embodied the weight of history, their movements echoing patterns honed over countless generations. Children mirrored and internalized these patterns, translating them into embodied understanding that would persist beyond words. The circle itself became a repository of collective knowledge, a living archive where the past, present, and future converged in real time. The ritual transformed ordinary gestures into conveyors of significance, embedding meaning into posture, movement, and attention. The firelight and shadows accentuated relational dynamics within the circle. Faces revealed trust, attention, and alignment, shadows emphasized collective cohesion and the interdependence of presence. Elders taught children to recognize these subtleties, fostering a sophisticated awareness of nonverbal communication, group dynamics, and social responsibility. The last circle was as much about perception and understanding as it was about participation. Every individual's awareness contributed to the integrity and resonance of the whole. Children internalized the lesson that presence required attentiveness, empathy, and deliberate action. Environmental interaction remained central. Wind, distant water, and nocturnal sounds provided context and rhythm, influencing pace, gesture, and attention. Elders guided the tribe to remain responsive to these external cues, ensuring harmony between human and natural worlds. Children discovered that survival and ritual were inseparable from environmental awareness, learning to move, observe, and respond with precision, humility, and attunement. The last circle was a living lesson in the interdependence of life, culture, and nature. By the culmination of the ritual, the audience perceives a profound sense of closure, continuity, and transcendence. The last circle embodies the convergence of memory, perception, emotion, and social cohesion. Fire, shadow, movement, sound, and breath intertwine to create a living, dynamic tapestry in which each participant contributes to the preservation and transmission of knowledge. Children internalize these lessons, ready to carry the continuity forward. Elders witness the endurance of the collective spirit, ensuring that the circle's significance will persist beyond the immediate night. The last circle is thus both an ending and a beginning, a moment of reflection, reverence, and transmission that bridges generations and connects human experience to the enduring rhythms of the natural world. As the fire dwindled to glowing embers, the clearing transformed into a quiet cathedral of memory and reflection. Warmth and light receded, leaving behind faint traces of smoke curling toward the star-strewn sky. The tribe sat in silence, attentive to the fading glow, each ember a symbol of the lives, stories, and lessons that had been shared within the circle. The night seemed to pulse softly with ancestral presence, as if every spark contained fragments of countless generations who had gathered here before, leaving traces in air, earth, and memory. Children, still wide-eyed from the intensity of the ritual, felt the weight and wonder of this continuity, sensing without fully understanding that the fire's fading light did not signify an end, but a transformation. Elders leaned forward, observing faces illuminated by the residual glow. Their eyes, reflecting both wisdom and the sorrow of knowing that some nights are final, scanned the circle, absorbing gestures, expressions, and the unspoken resonance that filled the space. In these quiet moments, teaching continued without words. Breath, posture, and attention became conduits of knowledge. The rhythm of inhalation and exhalation carried lessons of endurance and connection, while subtle shifts in gaze conveyed recognition, guidance, and care. Children, attuned to these signals, learned that memory is not only recorded in stories but encoded in presence, observation, and shared experience. The embers themselves seemed to hold stories. Small sparks leapt into the night, briefly illuminating faces, leaves, and branches before fading. Each flicker became a reminder of impermanence, of cycles of life and death, of moments that exist only briefly before merging into history. Elders spoke softly, narrating fragments of memory, lessons of survival, ancestral tales, and reflections on the meaning of continuity. Their voices were low, harmonizing with the natural soundscape of night, rustling leaves, distant water, and the occasional nocturnal call. Children listened intently, internalizing both spoken and unspoken lessons, realizing that memory was alive, dynamic, and deeply intertwined with the environment, community, and ritual practice. Movement in the clearing slowed, becoming deliberate and reflective. Participants shifted slightly to warm themselves or adjust posture, but every gesture was infused with awareness and intention. Even the smallest movement held symbolic weight, reinforcing the interplay between presence, observation, and memory. Children, observing these subtleties, began to understand that continuity was maintained through both action and inaction, that attentiveness to detail mattered as much as participation in grand gestures. The embers provided a focal point, a living representation of transience, resilience, and interconnectedness that could be read and interpreted through observation, reflection, and embodiment. The interplay between light, shadow, and perception continued even as flames faded. Shadows stretched and softened across faces, bodies, and surrounding foliage, creating an ephemeral tapestry that mirrored the ephemeral nature of memory itself. Elders subtly guided children's attention, encouraging observation and reflection. The fading glow highlighted the fragility and beauty of the moment, teaching lessons of impermanence, attentiveness, and the intricate connections that sustain community and culture. Memory, the elders conveyed, is not fixed, it is breathed, lived, and carried forward in gesture, perception, and collective presence. Emotion deepened in this final phase of the night. Awe, reverence, and melancholy intertwined, amplified by the quiet of the forest and the residual warmth of fire. Participants felt both the intimacy of shared presence and the vastness of ancestral and environmental context. Children mirrored these feelings, oscillating between wonder, solemnity, and quiet reflection. Elders demonstrated emotional regulation through subtle posture, gaze, and breath, modeling how to carry grief, joy, and awareness with balance and composure. The embers amplified emotion, creating a resonant space where individual and collective feeling merged, leaving a lasting impression of depth, connectivity, and significance. Sound remained a subtle yet powerful component. The soft crackle of remaining embers, rustling leaves, distant water, and nocturnal life all contributed to a complex auditory landscape. Participants adjusted breathing, posture, and attention in response, creating a living dialogue with the environment. Children internalized the lesson that memory, perception, and awareness were inseparable from context, that the world itself participates in ritual, reflection, and continuity. The embers became a locus of sensory integration, where sight, sound, touch, and emotional resonance converged, reinforcing lessons of attentiveness, connection, and memory. Symbolism permeated the final moments. Each ember represented both a single life and a collective history, a fragment of experience within a broader continuum. Elders emphasized that memory is not passive but active, it must be observed, embodied, and carried forward. Children began to grasp that their own presence, attention, and actions were integral to this ongoing legacy. The ember's fleeting brilliance became a metaphor for impermanence, continuity, and the responsibility of the living to honor, transmit, and integrate lessons from the past into present action. The forest itself seemed to respond to the ritual's quiet intensity. Wind shifted subtly, carrying the scent of earth, leaves, and distant water. Nighttime creatures moved softly, contributing layers of sound, motion, and presence. Elders guided the tribe to maintain awareness, integrating environmental cues into perception and reflection. Children discovered that memory is not isolated within human experience, it interacts with landscape, flora, fauna, and the subtle rhythms of nature. The embers, fading but persistent, symbolized the interconnectedness of human life, environmental context, and ancestral presence. By the end of the night, the embers had transformed the clearing into a reflective sanctuary. Participants, both young and old, had internalized lessons of continuity, attentiveness, emotion, and presence. Memory was no longer abstract, it was lived, breathed, and shared, encoded in posture, gesture, attention, and perception. Children left with an embodied understanding of their connection to the past, their responsibility to the present, and their role in shaping the future. Elders witnessed the transmission of knowledge, the persistence of culture, and the enduring impact of ritual. The embers became a lasting symbol, a bridge across time, connecting generations, human experience, and the environment in a profound, intimate, and deeply reflective communion.